Do you want to get this started? We good to go?
Yeah, let's go.
Recording. Um, I don't know if Wesley, do you want to pray for us?
Yeah, let's do that. That's a
Yeah.
great idea. Lord God in heaven, we just thank you for the ways that you're clearly working in our lives and the way that you're revealing truth and bringing to light so many things. We thank you for using us as tools
Mm.
in your plan for the glory of your kingdom. And Lord, we just pray that you would guide us in wisdom by your Spirit to just clarify some issues and that this video, like the previous ones that we've been doing, would just be eye-opening to people and to help people truly see uh, the way, the truth, and the light.
Mm.
So, Lord, would your word be our rule, and your spirit our teacher in this moment, and your greater glory be our supreme concern. In your name, amen.
Amen. Beautiful. Thank you, brother. Okay. Hi, everyone. Anton and Wesley here. We are going to be reacting to Billy's breakdown of the debate pretty much. And, I want to start this off with I think a lot of Christians and other communities believe we're attacking Billy. And I want to make it very clear this is not an attack. This is not anything other than speaking truth to what is lies. And hopefully you can feel Wesley's spirit, my spirit, our intentions with this, because I particularly have a very soft spot for people who are misled by figures like Billy, because I've spent my whole life working for people like Billy, but more so than that, trusting their doctrine of religion, of spirituality, of life, really. And those doctrines really affected my life very negatively. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't all negative. Like, I was able to make a lot of money, but spiritually, I was dead, literally. And I put my faith and trust in the hopes that people like Billy, who claim to be experts in research, I put my faith in them. And I built a business around that. So it's not that I dislike Billy. I actually like the guy. I've had some really good times with him. I won't even say I haven't, but I really don't think it's right what he's doing. It's one thing to not believe in Jesus, like whatever. It's America. It's freedom of religion. Believe in whatever you want to believe in. But to attack a religion based off just pure lies, that's one thing. But then to also affect people with fraud and stealing money from them and in the name of God, he has the flower of life behind them. Anybody in a spiritual community, this is just pure disrespect to that doctrine. The flower of life, no one really knows exactly what it is, but we do know it's sacred for whatever it is. So I just didn't like the spirit behind this video. It actually freaked me out. And I think it shows you like a talking piece of this conscious space. And now that I'm a Christian, I have deep beliefs that this was something very spiritual happening here to Billy. And he was revealing who he really is. And I've seen these people like this my whole life, and they show up in a different form than who they really are behind the scenes, and it's scary when you see it. So I feel a deep calling to speak to that, but also have Wesley speak to just the lies as well, um, on this whole thing. So I just wanted to start it with that because I think a lot of people are getting confused on what our intentions are. Look, I'm trying to help people not go down the road I went down because I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. It was so scary. Like I said in my testimonial, I actually can't believe I'm alive. It was that dark. So yeah, with that said, those are kind of my opening thoughts. Wesley, please feel free to share how you feel and where your heart's at with all this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the motivation for doing something like this is ultimately to speak clarity into the confusion that's being spread around. I think that there's different aspects to, peeling back the onion on this particular case. If it was just the debate, I think that would be one thing, the interaction that Billy and I had. But then, unfortunately, Billy chose to go public and say not even just false things, but ridiculously false things. And so I think there's a place for just kind of clearing the air with Anton, with myself, even in regards to some of the background stuff with Mark, and saying like there's a truth to what happened and what is continuing to happen. And what Billy is propagating is just not that. And so this is an opportunity for people to hear from both of us and to get some just clarity around the fog that I think Billy is trying to cast on this. Now, I think that the transparency of this is that a lot of people they're seeing through that, and they're seeing through the chaos that's being created. But we just wanted to, play some things and go over some details and just make sure everything's crystal clear on what did take place and what's been happening over the last little bit.
Yes. Beautiful. All right. So, with that said, I'm the defendant number 3. Wesley is defendant number 2. That is how Billy refers to us in this video.
It's going to be a lot of people in here tonight. Got a lot of people popping in here tonight. It's going to be a long night. Got a lot to cover tonight. Got a lot to cover. All right. And as you know, I always bring receipts. So it's going to be a good talk. Okay. What is this video about today? Billy Carson exposes fake debate video. All right. What is this? What is this all about? What is he talking about? What's happening out there? What's going on? Everybody wants to know what's happening. What's going on? Well, I'm going to tell you what's going on. Yes, I am. I'm going to tell you what's going on. So let's start from the very beginning. We're talking about 4 defendants. Actually, now there's a potential 5th defendant. Their names are defendant 1, 2, 3, 4, and potentially 5. These are not names of people because those people are actual defendants. And you'll see by the end of this video why I call them defendants. And so they're defendants, not people. You see, unlike this gang that use the name of Christ as their battle shield to go do evil things and do a lot of things behind the scenes that are very dark, and to try to create this global network for little old Billy Carson. They have to attempt, and it's a bad attempt. They have to network with hundreds of thousands of people all over the world to supposedly end Billy Carson's career.
Okay. I don't know about you, Wesley, but the only people I've networked in this process are you, Mark, and that's about it. Have you networked
I don't
with
even
people?
think I know 100,000 people. I certainly couldn't name 100,000 people. I'd start to just make up names. Yeah, I mean, this should be a red flag to anybody who's listening. Like, I am a relative nobody. I honestly am. Like,
Same.
yeah, it's so grandiose that these kind of accusations would be funny, and they are to a certain degree, if they weren't if Billy wasn't, I think, serious in his accusation. Now, obviously, I think he knows he's being dishonest. There's no possible way he doesn't know he's making this up. But it's just like, it's just so unnecessary. It would have been one thing if he had come on and he tried to defend himself in the way that he went about the debate. That's not what he did. He came on and he accused us of being in a global crime syndicate. So I don't really know what to say to that.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. I don't fully get it. And one thing you said is that he knows he's lying. Dude, I really don't know if he does. Like, I know a part of him does, but like there's a part of me that's just like, yo, this dude actually believes his own hype.
Yeah, I think that could be true. I think, I know people who I think are genuine, like undiagnosed sociopaths who are chronic liars. And I know for a fact that those type of individuals start to believe their lies.
Mm,
And maybe that's the case with Billy, but there's just no evidence for any of this. Whatever he's found, and I can't honestly fathom what he thinks he's found. Um, but it's just not true. So maybe he does believe what he's saying because he's like manipulated his own thought patterns into thinking that this is reality.
right.
But if that's the case, there's some kernel. Maybe it's buried deep down, but there's no way he, when push comes to shove, when the rubber hits the road, actually thinks this is true, especially when he goes on to say the things that he does.
Mm, mm, mm. Fascinating.
Well, they only don't realize they not only are they not ending my career, they're making me more famous because they call my name out every 5 minutes. I'm on their tongue and their lips every minute of the day. When they go to sleep, they dream about me. When they wake up, the first thing they do before they kiss their wife or their boyfriend, they talk about me. They post me and call my name 24 hours a day, nonstop. They're absolutely infatuated with me. And because of that, and because of what they have done now, they have created this whole energy field. That's what's behind me now, this flower of love energy. They've created this energy. There's only one force that exists in the entire known universe. One force, one consciousness. There's only one.
I'm going to make a quick comment here. Okay, so my background, he's alluding to sorcery is what he's doing right now. And he's actually not wrong in what he means by cultivating people's energy. But this is dark. It's one thing to want people to like pray for you and things like that. But he's actually alluding to real sorcery, which is just, and what he goes on to say, like how he's deciding to use that power. A lot of occultists believe power is, they believe it's a neutral force and the vessel influences whether it's good or bad. I used to believe that same thing, but I actually found out, no, the source of power they're pulling from is actually dark, and some people can use it for light, but the source is dark. So it's just you're playing with fire. But that comment to me, just like that's when I actually turned this off because I was like, oof, like he's right. There's 10,000 people tuning into this, thinking about him, and now he's intentionally yielding that power. Oof, God, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
And that one force can be used for darkness and it can be used for light. Just like the Jedi. The Jedi will use the force for dark. The Jedi will use the force for light, I'm sorry, and the Empire will use the force for darkness. It's up to the wielder of the power. But the true masters know how to turn that dark energy into light.
It might be relevant at this point. It is a good guy color, so.
That's hilarious. Wesley, what are your thoughts? I heard Jordan Peterson make a kind of just an offside comment about Star Wars having undertones of the biblical text and Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, there are these hero motifs. I mean, both C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien discussed this. They were friends. If people don't know that, they were part of a group called the Inklings. They met in Oxford. And I think, of course, there are motifs in things like, that you can draw out in many superhero movies, The Matrix, Superman. Like there are obviously these sort of Messiah savior-esque components.
Right. The
I
archetypes.
think the difference with something, yeah, and I'm pretty sure George Lucas has talked about this. Like the idea of the Force was drawn mostly from Eastern mysticism and kind of the idea of the Tao and there being, a yin and a yang, and it's the balance of those things. Especially if you listen to how the Force is being described. Like, yes, there's a clear evil and there's a clear good, but it's almost drawing from the same thing. And like you said before, it's like how the power is used. So I think there are aspects of the fact that all truth is God's truth. Saint Augustine actually has this idea where he talks about how even the pagan philosophers had ideas that were obviously true, and he uses the analogy of the Israelites coming out of Egypt, and the Israelites took Egyptian gold, and that that gold could be used for good, and it's not that the gold is evil, but it's then the way that's used to twist, and they ultimately make it into the calf, right? So,
Oh wow.
um, uh, yeah, so I think of course there are going to be motifs that are going to be true because all religions, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, there are components that we can agree with.
Yes.
Uh, but like when I was talking with Billy about the Enuma Elish and kind of the parallels that exist between Genesis, it's not the similarities that you capitalize on in that regard. It's the differences that make the difference. So an analogy that I probably should have used, but I didn't use in my discussion with Billy is that Advil and arsenic both come in pill form and have an A on the package. But when you have a headache, there's a reason you don't reach for arsenic,
Mm.
right? It's not the similarities that make the difference in that regard. It's the differences, and the differences are stark. So sure, Star Wars has a lot of good components to it, and I think the narrative story is great. But I think we also need to be cautious of the worldview that some of these things are also communicating. With that said, we go on.
Yes. It's a great point. Yeah, and George Lucas, and he was heavily helped by Joseph Campbell, who um, he believes not necessarily in Jesus, but he believes in the symbolic Gnostic view of Christianity. So
All this energy that they're in their crock pot stirring up. We're going to attack Billy Carson. We must do everything we possibly can, including making fake accounts, making bots and robot accounts to comment and hate and try to thumbs down videos and attack and threats against his 12-year-old child, threats against his family, which I'll go over.
okay, that was none of us. If Christians are doing that, shame on you. That's ridiculous. Um, any comment to that, Wesley?
Yeah, at minimum, I doubt there are any bots. Yeah, but I don't think people should be commenting, threatening things or negative things or going after Billy's kid.
No.
Nobody should be doing that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and both Anton and I would condemn that.
Yes.
As they try to track down his goons or whatever you call these people, these zealots, track down, want to find out where I live, want to show up where I'm going to be, want to beg their followers for money to try to investigate and research me. Why are they doing this? Why are these defendants doing this? Well, there's two reasons, actually, maybe even three. The first reason is clout. These defendants, I'm sorry, are actually clout chasers. That's what they are. They're pure clout chasers. Nobody really cares to know who these people are, except for the people that are in their religion and which is not even a religion. It's more than religion. It's more like a cult. Because I know real Christian cult people. This is a cult that they're involved in.
Okay. Interesting comments. I wonder what he means by true Christians.
Hmm.
I don't understand what he's saying here. Like this was never about clout, at least from my perspective, unless Wesley, you have some sinister agenda to rise to fame and power. But I believe this was about just pure truth and looking to have a healthy discussion with somebody who claims he has the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, when I started making response videos, and they weren't solely about Billy, I made a
Right.
number of response videos to a number of individuals over the course of last summer. And that's kind of And I didn't really know who Billy was prior to that. I just knew, he'd gone on these major podcasts and he'd made these accusations. And I was constantly being sent these videos, and people were asking me, "What do you think of this?" Because a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. And so they were
Yes.
saying, like, "I don't have the resources to try to address this. Could you make a video about it? Could you, write something on your website about it?" And so that's why I started doing it. It wasn't for clout. And a few of the early comments also accused me of that. You're just a clout chaser. And my response was simply, no, I'm just a historian who's trying to make sure that people understand what actual history says about these things and
Mm,
what actual Christianity dictates about these things. So my theme has always been, you can go back into the Apologetics Canada podcast for a number of years now, and I've quoted this 18th century, he was a German theologian and philosopher, Count Zinzendorf, and his one of his famous lines is, "Preach the gospel, die and be forgotten." And
mm,
that's always been kind of my mantra
mm,
preach the gospel, die and be forgotten.
mm,
Because that's all we're called to. We're not called to be influencers and to chase attention. We're just called to be faithful. And
mm.
ultimately, I've been very grateful and blessed, privileged to be able to study the things I've studied. And I want to help others also know those things and know what is true in light of things that are just clearly untrue.
And for the record, um, what's happening with our audiences now that's gaining traction from all of this is people are finding kind of who they resonate with and why. And Wesley, a lot of people resonate with you because of your really sound historical research and education, and everything you do in your multiple languages and everything and stand for. I think you've set the bar very, very high for people in these apologetic spaces, and people in all across academia in general who have platforms. You've set the bar so high, which is amazing. And then for me, people are seeing my kind of crazy background, working with people like Billy, and siphoning in that way. And I just got to say, Wesley, again, like, you have no idea how important it is uh, to be doing what you're doing with debunking people like Billy, because millions upon millions, like I told you, the 10 million number just through my own efforts, have been led astray because you have somebody like Billy sitting there with just confidence, with no evidence, and it's not right. So for the record, I just got to thank you again.
Yeah,
It's
I
awesome,
appreciate
man.
that.
And your humility behind it, it's truly for me like a representation of the people who should have platforms. You should have a platform. The standard needs to be high for these are some of the most important decisions people make in their life, what religion they're going to believe in, what God they're going to follow. I would argue that is the most important decision, because that dictates your top value, and from there, your whole life will be dictated by that value. Some people like believe there's not a God, or they don't have a God. It's like, you don't have to be, whether you're a Christian or an atheist, you still have a God. You might not know it to be God. It might be a celebrity. It might be politics. It might be this. It might be that. But there's a God there at that top value. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it was G.K. Chesterton who said that, we're all worshiping something. It's not a matter of if we're worshiping, it's a matter of what we're worshiping. And so
yes,
whatever that
exactly.
idol is going to be, it's going to be. I mean, I think if I'm remembering correctly, it was Chesterton who, in this kind of dialogue, said, the man walking to the brothel is searching for God. In that,
Mm,
they're pursuing what they think is their ultimate goal and authority, and
yes.
ultimately, that's idolatry. If it's not
Mm,
uh, in line with what is true in worshiping the one true God and pursuing that with all of our heart, mind, and soul, then it's ultimately an idol. It's a false God.
mm. Great way to put it.
Real Christians, good friends that are real Christians. And what they're in is not Christianity, it's something totally different. So let's break it down.
You're right. Gnosticism.
We got 5,400 in the live chat. We got to get some more people in here. Make sure you guys share this video. We need more people in here. Get this video shared to everybody you can possibly get it out to. Let's see if Billy Carson's career is really going to come to an end. You see, you can't end the career of an independent man, a self-made man. I don't have any corporate contracts. I didn't sign a book deal with a major company. I own my own publishing company. I didn't sign a clothing deal with a clothing company. I own my own clothing company. Nice threads too. My own watch, my own shoes, my own everything. You can't shut down.
Okay, so whether you're a Christian or not, does this really represent the flower of life? No. Strange behavior.
Somebody or end the career of somebody that that didn't sign a TV deal with a major network. I own my own TV network. It's not going anywhere. You can't shut down somebody or end the career of somebody that has over 140 social media accounts with over 10 million followers. And I really call you guys 10 million leaders because I don't have followers. I create leaders on my networks. So you see, you can't really shut them down. You can't really end a career. All you can do is blow me up. And that's exactly what's been happening. But look, we're about to hit 6,000. We'll have 10,000 on here pretty soon. I'm just delaying a little bit. We'll have 10,000 people on here pretty soon, which is phenomenal. I want everybody on here. Get all your people. Keep sending more of your people over here. Send them on over because this is going to be a beautiful discussion tonight. Let's talk about this Christian ideology, this cult Christian ideology, to where they want to attack children. They want to find out about the children. They want to find out. They want to show up at the crib. They want to show up at the house. They want to pull up. Oh yeah, they never said this in any video, but the people that they're connected to, which we're going to break down who they are a little bit today. I'm going to save some for the legal system and I'll tell you the agencies that we're working with as well. But it's very interesting. You have to really begin to question the mindset of people and their real agenda, which is not spreading love and light and the gospel. It's really about domination, control, power, and taking over.
Okay, so that to me felt like pure projection. Pure projection. Like, I don't want to be rude, but if anything, Wesley, you have been spreading the gospel. Like, that's what this whole thing was about. This is to me showing his cards. That's his ideologies. That's what he wants. He doesn't care about love and light like he says he does. That's not what this is.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any kind of global conspiracy, it's the fact that all authority in heaven and earth has been given to Jesus. And so, like some theologians have said that, there is no aspect of this earth where Jesus has not said, that's mine. And so if there is a global conspiracy, it's that everything in heaven and earth has been given to Jesus. And we want people to know Jesus and be freed from the slavery and bondage of sin. But that's it. That's the only global conspiracy that I'm involved in.
Amen.
You see, that's what it's really all about. When we were live yesterday, I wouldn't lie. My wife went live yesterday. Some of their zealous cult followers, and you can go look at the comments. We didn't delete them all. They're there. I can't even repeat what was said about our son on this video because they will delete the video. But this is the following that these people have. They have real followers. We have leaders. They have followers. Because the people that are on our side, they would never bend their mouth to do some of the things, and also never take the bribes and take these secret phone calls that have been going out to try to recruit more people, to ask a lot of incredible questions and to dig deeper and to try to raise money and beg for money and to try to find out addresses and locations and all this kind of stuff. Threats of, we're going to be pulling up, we're going to be showing up at these events from the top all the way down. So defendant number one is part of a ringleader program. He's not the main ringleader, but he's one of them. And we're going to be going a little bit into that tonight as well, while we still also talk about this contrived debate situation. But this organization that is defendant, I'm sorry, it's not defendant number one. I'm not going to actually call him defendant number two because he's actually technically number two on the docket that we have. Defendant number one, we'll be talking about him in a minute. Defendant number two, he is a person that's heavily involved in the super left NDP. They're backed by religious zealots. A lot of them are with the University of Ontario.
For those who don't know anything about Canadian politics, the NDP is the National Democratic Party. So we have a three-party system here in Canada. We have the Conservative Party of Canada, the Liberal Party of Canada, and the NDP. This is just one of our three major parties. Now, is it left? Definitely. Like, this would be our kind of European socialism style party. They're kind of, it's almost always they've never there's never been an NDP prime minister. They're always kind of third tier. But to make this out like they're some kind of like ultra leftist terrorist organization, they're just one of the major parties in Canada. Like they control ridings in certain areas of the country, sure. Um, a lot of people within Toronto are supportive of the NDP because Toronto is a very liberal city. But am I part of the NDP? No. Have I ever voted for the NDP? No. Um, it's just like, I think what that shows is just a complete ignorance of A, Canadian politics, and B, the Canadian demographic. Anybody in Canada listening to that would be like, what? And then, as he goes on to say, that, well, they're very heavily involved in the University of Ontario. I know this has been said a number of times across different platforms of people reacting to this, but there is no University of Ontario. It does not exist. It is not a real institution. I am a student. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto. The University of Toronto. There is no, if you Google University of Ontario, it does not exist. So just putting that out there.
Sorry. I just find that hilarious. That's wild. There's not even it. It reminds me of things like it's a known forgery, like these different documents, the Book of Barnabas, and it's like there's a correlation there.
You know what I think this communicates, though? I mean,
Lack of research.
Well, not even that. I don't think he's Googled me. Mark told Billy who I was going into this debate, and I don't think Billy bothered to look me up then. I still honestly, and I could be wrong about this, and that's fine, but I honestly do not think he's looked me up. Because if he did, I mean, my bio is on my website. It's on the Apologetics Canada website. It's on my YouTube. It's on all my social media platforms are going to say PhD candidate, University of Toronto, associated with Wycliffe College at the University of Toronto. Like that's going to be laid out very clearly. And so I have a hard time believing that even when this took place, this live stream, that Billy had even bothered to look me up, find any information on me. I think he heard I was from Canada and he just ran with that. Because as we're going to see going forward, he also seems to get things wrong.
Insane.
Which we've already been in talks with the University of Ontario, and they're heavily involved in bribes for false information and doing a lot of what you would call research. If somebody has real knowledge, if their word is so powerful, if their holy words that they know and all their history that they supposedly know is so incredible and so true, why they got to do all this for little old Billy Carson? Why they got to come for little old Billy Carson? Why is that? It seems as if they just don't have the power they thought they had. All right. So we're heavily involved in a lot of research, along with sharing information with different parties, different organizations. One is the RCMP. That's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Through them, we were able to get connected with the VDP, the Vancouver Police Department, also the CFSEU, which they then linked us there in a conference call. So we're dealing with the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit, and they're involved in a lot of organized gang-related crime. That's what they're involved in. And why is it gang-related? Because in America, this would be called a RICO. When you put a group of people together and you begin to organize and you conspire to attack through cyber attacks, through physical attack, through threats, and you also you create this environment for negativity. You create this environment for potential threat of life. You create this environment for zealots to feel that they're now empowered to injure, potential injury, and things like that, or to disrupt business. That's a RICO. But they have something different in Canada for that, as we were told now through the attorneys and the talks we've had so far. And also the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, the CAFC. Cybercrime involves fraud, phishing, and other online fraud, including scams. And one of the scams is contacting people and paying bribes, offering bribes, which has happened, to get them to give an alternative view or a different opinion about forbidden knowledge or Billy Carson, which has already happened. There's already one named defendant. That'll be defendant number 3. Okay. Pretty interesting stuff tonight. So,
Okay, first of all, I have been bribed. I had a secret meeting in the Vatican, and they actually took me underneath the Vatican where the secrets are and revealed to me that my first victim was going to be Billy. And they said because of my extensive background in spaces like his, I was the perfect candidate. So they bribed me. Pope is paying me directly. I can't show the wires, but I can tell you it's a big number.
I thought I was the one bribing you. That's what Billy said.
Oh, sorry. I meant it's Wesley who took me to the Vatican to have the meeting.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
misspoke.
Yeah, sorry.
Or you misquoted. Yeah. So, I mean, this is what I mean about constantly going on, relying on information that is not in in conjunction with reality. Okay, mentioning that the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which by the way, the board of the organization I work for, we have a sergeant in the RCMP on our board. So I'm sure if there was a national investigation in me, maybe it would be pertinent for him to know about that. But that the RCMP connected them with the Vancouver Police Department. So I just Google it right now. Vancouver is almost 3,000 miles away from my house.
Sorry, I find that hilarious.
It's just, it would be the equivalent of me living in Boston and him notifying the LAPD.
Literally.
And this is what I mean. Like, maybe Billy is deluding himself into thinking that there is this global conspiracy against him, but there's no way he believes these things are true, or that his lawyer or his people, whoever they are in contact with these agencies, because none of this makes any sense.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking about that too. I know Billy's entire team. And I was like, man, like maybe they're feeding him this stuff and he's just not double checking and they're like looking at ChatGPT and they are conspiracy theorists. So, the conspiracy theory mind is so far away from reality. You'll almost believe anything if it's said with confidence and whatever else. So wild.
we got 7,000. Come on, let's go. Come on, bring the people on in here. Get this video out there now. I got a lot to talk about tonight. This is the video y'all been waiting on. I saw one of their videos go. I said, the video you've been waiting to see. Now, that ain't the video you've been waiting to see. Nobody's waiting to see their videos. Nobody cares to see their videos. Only the people that are already in the cult or people that are just curious. The people that want to see videos or the video they want to see is the ones that I'm putting out. And nobody puts out more volume of videos and content than I do. Not nobody in the world. Not one single person.
Okay, that's just insanity. Not true. Just not true.
Try to collectively create a whole bunch of content by passing the same video around 100 million times, talking about 2 things or 3 things. That's all you really have. You have nothing else to talk about. But in terms of real knowledge, you don't have any.
Okay, I'm sorry, Wesley, but the other day on your Instagram story when you were doing, I believe it's called cuneiform. Is that the correct terminology? That was
cuneiform.
That was awesome. And I think you're right to say Billy has not done his due diligence on you because you know way more than just ancient Christianity or the history of Christianity, I should say. Would you mind going over some of your other like fields of study? Like what other areas of life have you studied? And I mean, I think it'd be cool maybe share a tiny bit about your background. Like, you're not just a white dude. Like you're from the Middle East, like.
Yeah, I mean, at least so my parents were missionaries in Pakistan when I was born. So I was born in Multan in Pakistan. They were working with Muslims in Islamabad. And then we actually had to leave Pakistan during the Gulf War because it was not safe to be there anymore. We came back to Toronto, Canada for a year, and then we left back to the Middle East, where my parents worked in Amman, Jordan. And so they were there for a few years during when I was really young. And I actually went back to Jordan after I graduated high school. I had like a gap year where I did some work with Bedouin, which was very, very different than when I was younger and we were there. Bedouin are, I mean, the Arabic that they speak is almost, it's like hick Arabic. And the, the Jordanians even were like, don't worry, we don't know what they're saying either. That was a very different experience, but I do have that. And actually, having that experience led me on to do a lot of comparative religious work in the fact that I was I had a heart and still have a heart, very much so, for Muslims in doing evangelism and apologetics in regards to some of the claims that Islam makes against historical Christianity. And so in grad school, I did do a number of papers on comparative analysis with the textual histories of the Quran and the New Testament. And I have a couple of videos from a few years back now, but on that type of stuff, I have an entire row of a bookshelf just on Islam alone because tried to study that. When I was in grad school, one of the classes that I was taking was a world religions class, and the professor actually got a number of us involved in writing encyclopedia articles for the Melton Encyclopedia of American Religions because he was responsible for the Canadian edition. And so I did a number of articles in that. One in particular was on the Druze, which is like a break-off group from Islam. Ironically enough, I also did a one on Rastafarianism in Canada, which was an interesting thing to dig into and to go. But also Zoroastrianism and Gothak Kampa, which is like a break-off of Tibetan Buddhism. So I have a background in when I was in graduate school doing analysis of comparative religion. But my passion was really in the history of the Bible. And so I dug into that and studied the biblical languages, Greek and Hebrew. And then during my work with getting involved in my doctoral studies, I was required to learn one modern research language. So I learned academic German. And then because of the manuscripts that I'm looking at between the second and third centuries, they asked me if I could learn or at least get into some Coptic. So I learned Coptic, which is ancient Egyptian, but it's kind of the final version of ancient Egyptian in its iteration where ancient Egyptian had actually at that point adopted the Greek alphabet with a few other letters added, but essentially it's the Greek alphabet. So if you look at something like the Gospel of Thomas, it looks like it's written in Greek from Nag Hammadi Codex II, sort of the final preserved one from the 4th century, but it's not Greek, it's Coptic. And there's a lot of crossover at that point, but when I was studying Coptic, I got into a little bit of Demotic, which is the form of ancient Egyptian before Coptic, and which is, if anybody's heard of the Rosetta Stone, when I was in Egypt a couple summers back, I had the privilege to drive up to Rashid, which is the modern city of what is ancient Rosetta, and we went to the fort where Napoleon's forces had discovered the Rosetta Stone. And so the Rosetta Stone the top is hieroglyphics. It has hieroglyphics, Demotic, and Greek on it. And so because at the time they could read Greek, they were actually able to figure out what the Demotic said and then what the hieroglyphics said. And that was one of the key reasons why we were able to unlock ancient hieroglyphics. But so I've learned a little bit of that. Wow. So the Sumerian tablet you saw me making was it wasn't actually Sumerian. It was cuneiform, but it was Akkadian. So I've tried to learn Sumerian and I can't. It is too complicated. So related to that, when Billy claims that he knows Sumerian and he can read these Sumerian tablets, I don't believe it because Sumerian is a language isolate in that it has no languages around it that have any crossover. So it is a complete unique on its own. There are no comparisons. The grammar, the syntax, the structure it's an island into itself. So I have tried to learn a little bit of Akkadian based on the fact that it's an Afro-Semitic language like both Aramaic and Hebrew. So there's enough crossover to try to transition into learning some of that. And I've done a little bit of that. I'm not, hugely competent by any means. But actually, we homeschool our kids, and we did a lesson with them because they were learning about ancient Assyria and Sumeria and Acadia, and so we actually made out of Play-Doh. We made some Akkadian tablets, and we wrote all their names.
Oh,
We
that's
used them to
awesome.
with chopsticks. We used as the stylus, and they wrote their names in cuneiform. Uh,
That's so
so
cool.
so yeah, so my background is diverse in that I've because of my area falling into New Testament studies, I do a lot of I've been a teacher's assistant for graduate classes and co-taught classes on Introduction to New Testament, Introduction to the Gospels, early church history, because
Wow.
my area of expertise falls into New Testament studies in that I'm looking at primarily New Testament copies, but I'm also looking at other early Christian writings, copies, some of the early church fathers. And that requires me to know some background in the history of the early church, what was going on, the context for these writings. I've also, done that comparative work on other adjacent Christian documents like the Gnostic texts. So, I've worked with the actual, seeing the actual manuscript of the Gospel of Thomas, done some work on in fact, one of my language exams going into my PhD was a section of the Gospel of Peter that I had to site translate to pass that like aspect of my language exams. And then done work on a number of other manuscripts from the non-commodity library. So yeah, I mean, all that. And more, dabbled in other things in regards to just my Christian faith, systematic theology. I've taught,
Mm.
not formally, but taught classes at my church on systematic theology and that kind of stuff. So, I always say I'm a biblical scholar that is theologically informed. So,
Mm.
I have taught things that are related to theology, but I'm a biblical scholar first and foremost. But that's always informed by my theology because that's ultimately what I, adhere to as a Christian.
Yeah. 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 Awesome. So, everybody listening, let me summarize. The man's diverse. It's funny. I just want to, again, my audience, Wesley, primarily not Christians. So there's like, I just want to allude to a couple things. You said the Gospel of Thomas, like everybody listening, that is a Gnostic gospel. And Wesley, there's a quote that people in my old life pretty much reference heavily from the Gospel of Thomas. Like every every like spiritual person like who has platforms and brings up Jesus, people like Aaron, people like Joe Dispenza, Billy, Aubrey Marcus, Andre Ducum, all these guys with massive platforms. And by the way, I don't know Aaron, but everyone else, like, and not Joe, but I'm friends with these people. I was just talking to Aubrey Marcus yesterday. Um, they always reference this quote from Jesus from the Gnostic Gospels, and it's if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Wesley, just while we're here, what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, this is a forgery, but would that really be something Jesus would say?
Yeah, so I think that's reflective of the Gnostic aspects of the Gospel of Thomas, in that there's this kind of proto-Gnostic formulation that we find within it. So if people are interested, they can go to right now Apologetics Canada. Their YouTube page has released the first and second episodes of the Can I Trust the Bible series that I wrote and produced, and we talk about the Gospel of Thomas, where it was found, some of its content, and the implications of it. And let me say just right off the bat, even though there are names associated with these documents, like Thomas, who was an individual who was a disciple of Jesus, when this was written, we know Thomas was dead. So the author is not Thomas, who was the disciple of Jesus.
Mm,
What the quote you referenced kind of indicates is the fact that in Gnostic theology, and we do have to be careful when we use that term
right. It's
Gnosticism,
a
because it's,
broad brush for
yeah,
sure.
and it's largely a modern recreation of kind of an umbrella term for these various different mystic groups that existed. Even what we would describe as Gnostics themselves would have not agreed with other groups that we also label as Gnostics. So there
Right.
are contradictions between these documents and between the Gnostic Gospels themselves.
They're the
But
first.
what
Is this accurate? They're the first kind of like break off cults of Christianity. Is that kind of accurate to say?
Sort of. We do have like groups like the Ebionites, who, from what we can reconstruct, were probably a Jewish sect that believed Jesus was the Messiah, but not that he was divine. They believed, or the adoptionists who believed that Jesus became the Messiah when he was baptized. Um, one of the earliest Harry's
Hmm.
one of the earliest
Interesting.
heresies, rather, really is what's called modalism, which was an idea that Jesus, the Father, and the Spirit were not, as Trinitarian theology articulates, that. So in Trinitarianism, Jesus, the Father, and the Spirit are one in being or essence, but different in person. So what that means is that the one being of God is encompassed by three co-equal, co-eternal persons. And being describes what something is. It's an ontological category, right? So my microphone has being, right? I can see that it has like an ontological category. It exists. It has physical components to it, but it doesn't have personhood. I can't ask my microphone if is it okay if I speak into you today, right? It's not going to respond to me. Um, so one is a category of ontology, and one is a category of personality. And so we say that in Scripture, the Father is called Yahweh God, the Spirit is called Yahweh God, and Jesus is the Son of. He is Yahweh God. So all of them are given, and there's this great book. There's actually an update to it. The older version is called Putting Jesus in His Place. It's by Rob Bowman and Ed Komazowski. And they have this category system that I appreciate and use often, is that when we're talking about not just the divinity of Christ, but the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in general, that they're all three of them are given the honors, the attributes, the names, the deeds, and the seat of God. So it spells the acronym HAND. So the honors of God are given to Jesus, the Father, and the Spirit. The attributes of God are given to the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. The HAN, the names of God, the deeds of God, and then the seed of God. They're all given to the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And so modalism was an idea that said that, well, the Father was the way that God manifested himself in the Old Testament. During Jesus' earthly ministry, the Father became the Son and died on the cross as the Father manifesting as the Son. And now God exists in the Spirit. And so Jesus was actually praying to himself when he was praying in, say, the Garden of Gethsemane. In John 17, his high priestly prayer, he's praying to himself, that the Father then died on the cross. And so the early church condemned this. It's called patripassionnalism, the Father dying on the cross. They said, no, that the Father is ruling and reigning in heaven when Jesus'
Yeah.
physical body dies on the cross. And that the Spirit is the Spirit of God that is present in both the Old and New Testaments. And so that was arguably one of the earliest heresies. I mean, you can also see, the Judaizers that Paul addresses in the book of Galatians. That's another group that's kind of condemned early on. So there are a number, but definitely the Gnostics pop up in the 2nd century. And so getting back to your original question, that quote that you referenced, what this communicates is this idea that in biblical Christianity, salvation is something external to you, done on your behalf via the finished work of Jesus on the cross. Right? The whole point is that you cannot save yourself because you are dead in your sins and trespasses. You need a savior. You need someone to step in the void and to advocate on your behalf, as the author of Hebrews says, that you need an intercessor who can, like the high priest in the Old Testament, who can stand in the Holy of Holies and advocate on your behalf to the Father. And that's what Jesus does. The contrast to that we see in Gnosticism is that salvation is not something done outside of you, external to you, but it's actually something inside of you. So it's not just that Jesus is divine, Anton. You're divine, I'm divine, and we unlock that with secret knowledge. And so there are
Gnosis.
certain Yes, gnosis. So gnosis is the Greek word for knowledge. And so there are
Yep.
certain keys to that that we find in something like the Gospel of Thomas. And then it comes really, it's far more overt in later documents, like the Gospel of Philip. Once again, not written by the disciple Philip. Just his name is appropriated in that document, like all the others. But so that's where we see that is that it kind of, and I think resonates with a new age mindset and philosophy where we believe that the spark of the divine is in us, kind of like what Billy articulates as well. And so that they draw on these sources, but these sources are not reliable. They're not early. They contradict one another. And the way that they're often used, much like, say, Hinduism or Buddhism, if you actually talk to a practicing Hindu and then you kind of compare that to what the New Age kind of borrows from Hinduism, they're not the same thing. It's like cafeteria worldview, right? You pick what you like, you leave what you don't like,
Exactly.
and then you just go on from there. But ultimately, it's not actually respectful to any of the perspectives that they're drawing from. It's not actually
Agreed.
respectful to Christianity to invoke Jesus in the way that the New Age does, or to invoke Buddhism, or to invoke Hinduism, or to invoke Taoism, or Confucianism, or any of these things, because those worldviews have essential tenets and worldview claims that someone in the New Age actually has to deny by picking and choosing from its actual perspectives.
So well said, man. I was really touched when, like, something, one of the big critiques of Christianity through the Gnostic lens of the circles I used to be a part of is like exactly what you're alluding to. Like, why would God sacrifice himself to himself? Why would God pray to himself? And
Yeah.
these people don't understand the Trinity in its true doctrine. And it's like, yeah, they just really don't understand the Trinity at its
Yeah.
base form. But it really touched me when you were just saying like, we need a savior. Gosh, every time I talk about Jesus, man, it's so hard for me not to cry. Um, yeah, because we can't do it. Like we can't do it, and all these people in these circles think they can do it, and they can't. Like it's
Yeah.
impossible. And like the biggest my big like my aha moment. I mean, I've had so many, but one of the hugest things that landed for me was like every man tried to be God. Like Hinduism, you're reaching up to God. Buddhism, you're reaching up to God. In Christianity, like God manifested in form to come to us and to live like us, like me and my friend Spencer, shout out Spencer. Um, we were in cults together and all this stuff, and we escaped, and we both came back to Christ on our own timelines. And he like still had some hesitance about Jesus's lost years. And I challenged him. I gave him a couple scriptures. I forget which ones exactly, but I was like, he's like, don't you like, why would that not be in the Bible? And I'm like, dude, because he's just a humble guy. There's not much to talk about. He's living life. He's just doing what maybe we all do and did. And wow, if that's true, how much relatable is that? Like, gosh, I'm really trying hard not to cry. Um, like, am I on par there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what we do see in scripture is it just says, Jesus grew in knowledge and stature,
Mm,
and before his God and before the Father. And so I think that's what we see. Even, drawing from my own area of expertise in historiography, we often anachronistically, and what that means is that we're reading something back from our time frame onto something in the past where it doesn't fit. If you read the ancient biographers, if you read Pliny and Plutarch and Aristophanes and Xenophon and Tacitus, they specifically say, you don't need to say everything. And if something is impertinent, specifically one's upbringing, do not include it. So unless something is, because when we think of biography, we're like, you have to include everything and you have to go into the psychology of the individual. The ancient world was not interested in that. And so we do
mm,
have biographies where most of them leave out the childhood because, I mean, if nothing important happens in the childhood, then why bother? And we do have, the birth in Luke and Matthew because that's important. And then Luke includes the story of 12-year-old Jesus going to the temple and teaching, the rabbis in in the temple court because that's important, that's pertinent. But an ancient biographer would have had no issue with the quote unquote lost years of Jesus. And even then, we get a snippet when Jesus goes back to Nazareth later on in his ministry. Everybody's like, hold up. This is the carpenter's son. We know who this is.
He's
You
a
know who his
nobody.
family is. We know who his siblings is. Why is he going around talking like a prophet? Like, if there truly was this kind of miraculous Jesus child, that would not have been their reaction. They would have been like, oh, yeah, of course, we saw this coming. But no, they're like, come on. Jesus? The Jesus? We know that guy. That's Joseph's son. He's a carpenter's kid. Like, so we can see from the earliest sources that, exactly what you said. Jesus walked in humility until the
Yes.
appointed time when he was trusting in the Father's timing of what would come to pass. And he didn't try to force it. And he didn't try to, do things on his own terms. He submitted his will to the Father as the second person of the Trinity, entering into humanity and taking on the finite form of human flesh, fully God and fully man, in ultimately to glorify God and save his people.
So beautiful. I love it. It's so good. Even from even for the Christians or even for the people who are non-Christians, like if you're really honest in your search, you can at least appreciate the profoundness of the story of Christ. It's just, anyways, I digress. Let's get back into this. Thank you for clarifying that, Wesley. I think it's so important for my audience to hear this stuff.
Let's start with defendant number one. Okay.
I think I skip over this
Defendant
part.
number one. Let me pull this out. People are shocked that I'm suing somebody. I've sued a lot of people already. This is. I'm not a dummy. I'm not one of these kids from the hood that just goes out there and gets into fights and shoots people. I don't do that. I use the same legal system that's been afforded to everyone else of every color and every race. There's people out there in this gang, this gang out there. I do call them a gang. This organized crime gang. They want to establish me as some type of a crazy guy who pulled up on a YouTuber when that's not what happened. Okay. Now I actually got very sick. I was extremely sick and went in the hospital prior to this whole thing happening. And when I say I was sick, I was deathly ill. I actually almost died. We did a whole podcast about this maybe a couple of months back when it first happened. I'm still not fully out of recovery. Okay. This is me in the hospital and my wife sleeping on a sofa next to me while in the middle of the night. You can see the heart monitor, the oxygen in my nose and everything else. And I did a podcast about it because she literally saved my life and allowed me to make it back to America so that I can get hospital treatment in America, because where I was, they didn't have the proper treatment. And why am I showing you that? Also to establish a timeline. It's very important to understand what was going on. And yes, I was really in the hospital, and yes, I was really sick. Okay, here goes my hospital bandage that I take, because everyone knows that my leaders out there, my leaders that are always on my accounts, know that I always keep receipts of every single thing. And that's my hospital bandage. And then I have my hospital bills. This is my bill for the stay in the hospital, $37,460.
Pause that for a second, Anton.
That's one of the three, right?
So I think this is pertinent because he does provide dates. So if you pull that back up,
James, pull it up.
you'll see the date there is 9/13/2024. Okay. That's November, right?
Billy.
So that would be November 13th. Or no, sorry. September 13th. Sorry, yes, correct. September 13th. Okay. The interaction that I had with Billy happened on November 15th. So, and
I think it was October. It was November.
Sure. I'm wrong. You're right. Correct.
It was October.
October 18th.
October.
Sorry,
18th,
I was looking at the wrong calendar. It's October 18th. I was having lunch with a friend on the 17th when I saw Mark's message to me. And then it happened the next day. So what this means is that Billy was out of the hospital.
Caught with his own evidence.
Billy was out of the hospital for more than a month when this took place. So it would have been 35 days after he got the bill for the hospital.
Oh my gosh. I did not notice this.
Yeah, and I don't know if Mark wants me to say this or not, but Mark did tell me that he knew exactly when Billy was sick because he went and visited Billy when Billy was sick.
Oh my God.
So I think this is This is just, it's an error on his part, but it's also disappointing because Billy would know that someone like Mark, defendant number one, would know exactly what was going on in this timeline and knew exactly. I mean, the day after this, the interaction that I had with Billy on October 18th, Billy got in a plane and then flew over to do a thing with Terrence Howard. So if he was still so sick, why
Right.
why was he going off to do a multi-day thing with Terrence Howard? Like,
Ah,
I think this is
gosh.
an attempt to try to justify certain things. Um, and I think, unfortunately, when you try to contrive a theory and try to manufacture a narrative, but you're talking about actual dates that happened, these things can be backtracked and verified. And unfortunately, I don't deny that Billy was sick.
No, he was. He
He
100%
was
was.
sick.
He was
He was
sick.
just sick over a month before
Yep.
him and I actually talked.
Wow. Yeah, Jordan Peterson, don't lie. Don't lie. Because when you, especially, man, as a public figure, I mean, you should never lie, but there's a spectrum, right? And yeah, this is just bad. It's just bad.
Yeah, but for the record, or October 18th.
18th.
There's another one here for $1,601. And there's another bill. I mean, oh, here it goes. $2,585.
Okay. Is there a date here? I don't see a date, but it doesn't matter.
These are often at one stay in the hospital. Okay, so these are the hospital bills. So I was extremely ill and sick. And to add to that point, here during the session where I went over to Mark's house, which was right around the corner from me, if you look at my arm in the lower corner of the photo, you see that I just got the IV bandage taken out of my arm from being in the hospital. Okay, I just got the IV bandage out. I was in the hospital with a severe case of pneumonia, and that pneumonia was so severe that it literally almost killed me. And my whole right side was completely full of bacteria, and then the left side was almost full. I had only 25% oxygen support. My body was going into septic shock, white blood cell count trending up towards 40. I lost 22 pounds and was extremely ill. I noticed yesterday when my wife was talking and some of the posts that she had made, people were commenting, that black guy, these are the Christian followers of this cult. That black guy looks like he's on drugs, and people commenting, yeah, he's on drugs, he's a dope addict, and all these crazy comments. This is how they uplift you. This is the enlightened people. These are the chosen ones, right? Well, I looked sick in the video because I actually was sick. Matter of fact, before the video started, I had a bottle of water, and I told him, look, you may have to stop this a couple times because I can't really breathe that well yet. My lungs are still recovering, and I coughed from time to time because I was trying to cough up still a little bit of phlegm in there from the pneumonia. After they
Okay, so I have the raw footage. Not true. That is just not true.
I got
I mean,
done
I
with
think
IVs,
I
they moved
coughed
me on to
a couple times during it.
Yeah, you
Uh,
did.
I have, I mean, we won't go into my sinus issues. I don't think that's pertinent to this. But you'll notice actually in the live footage, and I'm doing it today too. I mute
Right, you're
myself a lot
muting and cough.
uh,
Yeah.
because I don't have great sinuses. So
the actual tablet or pill. You take these huge horse pills and got to keep taking those antibiotics until your lungs are clear. But it's still a long healing process, a 12-week healing process. And I got like a week and a half or two to go for this healing process. Now, why is that important? Why is that important to this whole thing? Well, because I wasn't even supposed to leave the house. I was extremely sick. I had just had a near-death experience in the hospital a few days prior, got released. I had been so sick for the 2 weeks leading up to the hospitalization, trying to get back to America, trying to stay alive. And then
pause that for a second.
I'm bedridden, and I just
A few days prior. It's important to
Ooh.
note. That's what I said. A few days prior.
got to get up and do something. I can't stay. I just can't lay down like this. I just can't do it. Like for a person as active as me, it felt horrible. I felt like I was, completely useless. So I get a call from Mark. It's like, hey man, gonna hop on the podcast. I'm like, okay, yeah. I'm like, that sounds like a good idea. Something I can do. And all I gotta do is go around the corner from my house. I don't have to even leave the neighborhood. I don't have to go on an airplane, which is what I usually have to do. I can just literally walk around the corner and go in his house. So that's what I did. My wife was extremely unhappy that I told her I was going to go over there. I was like, I'll just be like 30 minutes or so. It won't be a big deal. He just wants to have a conversation. We're going to talk about some things. He got somebody else coming on. I really thought it was just going to be like a casual conversation about our perspectives on reality and our perspectives on religion versus spirituality. I really didn't know it was going to be any kind of a debate. Okay, it's more of an ambush situation. And I have all the text messages to prove this, which are going to be in the discovery for defendant number one. I go over there. I'm a little gassed, but whatever. I'm just happy to be involved in anything at this point. I sit down, get mic'd up and everything else. I get myself some water. I give him that warning about my coughing so that he knows, like, if you just pause every now and then, you might have to edit the coughs out. Okay, I think that's on recording actually from the beginning of the video. They probably edited that out already, whatever. And then he brings on this guy on the screen, Defendant number 2. So Defendant number 2 comes on the screen. I have no idea who this guy is. I literally have no clue who this guy is. I don't know his name. I don't know who he is. I don't recognize him from anywhere.
By his own doing, I can confirm Mark did tell Billy about Wesley.
Yeah, and you know what? Mark asked me prior, like when we had a phone conversation the day before, would Billy know who you are? Would he recognize your name? He said, I'm gonna tell Billy who you are, but I just want to know, would he recognize who you are? And I said, I highly doubt it. In fact, I'm almost certain he does not know who I am. I'm almost sure he still does not really know who I am. But so Billy was made aware of both my name, who I was, and kind of my background. You know what? I also think it's pertinent to say, it could be important to say this. I specifically say, and I have a message that I sent to Mark, like, hey, because in the initial DM that Mark sent me, he said, hey, like, I'm having Billy coming to my studio, and I wonder if you could, do this thing. And my response was, hey man, wow, that's quite the request. I'm actually up in Toronto, Canada, so I'm afraid I'm nowhere near where you are. I'd be willing to jump in digitally, but I wouldn't want to infringe on anything you've already got going on with Billy or make things awkward. I specifically said that.
Wow.
And then in the phone conversation, I said, Mark, I am fine with doing this as long as Billy doesn't think I'm trapping him. I don't want Billy to think I'm ambushing him. I used the words trap and ambush. And I said that to Mark.
That's insane.
I actually said that to Mark. I said, I will do this. I'm more than willing to do this. But A, I don't want to wreck your friendship. A little bit ironic in retrospect. And I don't want Billy to feel like it's some sort of gotcha moment. Those were things that were mentioned prior to this. I have this message, Mark responds and said, it's all good. I know Billy. I'm his friend. I can vouch for his character. I don't think those things will happen.
That aged well.
Yeah.
Crazy. So yeah, definitely malicious intent with gang violence going into this for sure. You were out for blood.
Yeah.
Off the street. I have no clue who this guy is, but whatever. He seemed like a nice gentleman. I thought we were going to have a really nice conversation. Now, this whole time, I'm thinking this is just going to be a conversational based thing. Not a big deal. I don't got to stress my brain. I don't got to think too hard. We're just talking. And then Mark gets this guy on the live feed, and he says, "Hey, we're gonna have a little debate." I'm like, "A debate?" He's like, "Yeah, we're gonna talk about this your perspective of religion and stuff and so on, whatever." And I'm like, "Huh?" I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And
never happened. And if for anyone wondering if that happened, the full and unedited, unadulterated interview is on Wesley's channel. So go react or go watch it. I have it on my channel as well, but I react to it. You probably want to watch it in its fullness with no reaction. Yeah, so this never happened.
So now in a debate, the way that this works, I've been in debates before, real debates, okay? Like from school, the debate club. I understand what
Okay, also not true. Billy has never been in a debate, and he says he would debate anybody on shows like Patrick Bet David. Maybe I can show a clip here. Not true.
Second to none. I'll stand by my research and investigation against anyone.
Who have you debated?
Whoever did debate.
Have you ever had like a public debate with anybody? Like it's on YouTube, we can see, or no?
Haven't had a public debate. There's only one person that wanted to debate me, but he only wanted to debate me so that he can clout chase.
Is he a big name or no?
Well, he's not a big name. He's trying to become big, but I looked him up first. I researched him before I disagreed and found out that he had did some things like, he had a sexual abuse on a 19-year-old minor. And I'm like, why would I make a guy like this famous?
You're open to debating anybody?
I'm open, yeah.
Okay, so if we set up anything with anyone else that's maybe expert in the area of topic that you're okay with a panel like that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It is, because I've actually been in actual real debates. There's a moderator, a person that moderates. The moderator, him or herself, does not interfere with the conversation. They don't interfere, you see? They don't commandeer the conversation. And the moderator is there to allow both parties to actually get a chance to talk and get their point across. But that's not what happened. What happened was, as we opened this up, the moderator asked the first question, not the defendant number 2. Okay. Now that's interesting. So I go, okay, this is from the jump. I'm like, well, that's kind of strange. If this is a debate, then it's supposed to be a little bit more organized. I said, well, maybe he doesn't have the etiquette of knowing debates like I do because I've been in real debates and so whatever. I didn't think nothing of it at that exact moment. So the first thing he asked me is about the gospel of Jesus' wife.
Okay, not a big deal, but that's not true. The first thing we asked, Mark asked Billy was about the crucifixion, and that was very intentional on my behalf because I was like, it's gotta set the tone. I know you and Mark talked about it as well, Wesley, but any comments around that?
Yeah, so I have been in actual debates. I've done a number of debates with Muslim imams. I'm just pulling the one up because I actually have one on my YouTube that you can go look up. I did one at McMaster University in 2019. I can't seem to find the individual's name. He was an Ahmadi Muslim imam. It was on the crucifixion of Jesus. So I've been in formal moderated debates before, primarily with Muslim imams, but I've done some other more kind of less formal dialogue type events, which I think this is what we could categorize more as a informal dialogue event too. But
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a debate.
it is true usually that the moderator is there to facilitate the conversation. But if anybody's watched the presidential debates, who asks the questions?
Right, the moderator.
The moderator asks the questions, right?
Yeah.
So in the recent U.S. presidential election, when Kamala Harris and Donald Trump sat down, it was the moderators who asked the questions to the interlocutors.
Yeah.
So there is a format where that does happen. Is it the usual format for formal debate? Not necessarily, but it is not out of the realm of possibility. And it is not out of the realm of possibility for the moderator actually to intervene and give a perspective. That also does happen, especially in a more informal setting like we were having in terms of like a discussion dialogue on these issues. So
Yeah.
it's just that's not Billy's trying to make this sound like it was just completely out of, the realm of normal possibilities. This was completely inappropriate. And as someone and I would not describe myself as a debater. I have friends who are debaters. My friend Jonathan McClatchy is a very competent debater. There are people out there, William and Craig, John Lennox, James White, Michael Brown. These people have, dozens, if not hundreds of debates under their belt. And could put debater on their resume. I would not personally actually do that. That's not kind of what I regularly do, although I have done it from time to time. But that being said, what Billy is trying to make it out to be is not the case, either for debates more broadly or for what was going on in this particular conversation.
I think that was the first thing. It might have been the second thing, but it might have been the first thing. Either that or the Sinai Bible question. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I give my answer about the gospel of Jesus' wife, to what I knew about it. Not even a deep answer, just a very surface answer. I'm just like, whatever, man. I'm just surviving at this moment. And then the gentleman, defendant number 2, he comes back with all this rhetoric about it's a known fake and it's this and that and everything else and it's no good and it doesn't exist and blah, 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 blah. Or it's fake or whatever he's talking about. I'm like, okay, well, let me get my rebuttal in on this fakeness. But I never got a chance to get my rebuttal in because I had something very important to say about that, which I'm going to talk about tonight about the gospel of Jesus' wife. And I'm going to play a couple of short videos as well. Okay. And then the second question, or maybe it was the first, like I said, I can't remember. And again, I was so sick and ill, to be quite honest with you. Maybe I did bumble my words a couple times with the Sinai Bible or the Barnabas text. It's quite possible. Look, some of y'all think I'm an alien, but I'm really human. Okay, I'm a person just like you guys are. And to that effect, and being in that weakened state, which he knew he caught me in one of my most weakest states. He saw how I only weighed 206 pounds at his house. So I was very, very frail and thin. I've gained back now 15 pounds, but at the time I was very thin, just weak. But I'm human. I might have bumbled the Barnabas text for the Sinai text or whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is I never got a chance to answer any questions or get.
Okay, no, it does matter. It does matter, and it's not even accurate what he's saying right now. It's insane.
Well, and not only did he get his view in, he conceded.
Yeah, right.
He conceded the point. He when Mark asked the initial question, which was, why do you deny the crucifixion? That was the first question. He brought up the Sinai Bible, which, by the way, I think Billy is the only person who calls it the Sinai Bible. I can't figure out where he's gotten that from.
Oh, he shows it. He shows it later on.
Where he got the term Sinai Bible from?
Well, no. Well, like I think he went into Chat GPT and like I don't
Oh,
know. It doesn't make any sense to
yeah.
me.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's called Codex
Right,
Sinaiticus.
Codex Sinaiticus, exactly.
Its abbreviation is Aleph. If you like are trying to shorten the, but so it, he says, well, the reason I deny the crucifixion is because the Sinai Bible, aka Codex Sinaiticus, and the Gospel of Jesus' wife. And then when I address Codex Sinaiticus, he concedes the point and says I misspoke, or I think he says I misquoted. He misquoted himself. I think he meant to say I misspoke. Um, and then he tries to bring up the Gospel of Barnabas. And so when I point out the Gospel of Barnabas, and I didn't even address all of the issues with the Gospel of Barnabas, there were more things I could have. I was trying to be brief. I mean, the
Right.
Gospel of Barnabas has Jesus sailing to Nazareth, and
Did you,
Nazareth is landlocked. Like it's a test case in anachronisms. If you want to look at something that has shows no evidence, like is a test case in forgery, it's the Gospel of Barnabas. So he
don't
concedes the Gospel of Barnabas. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry. I was gonna ask, don't a lot of my best friend is a Muslim. I love the Muslim people. They're amazing. But don't they also quote the Gospel of Barnabas?
Yeah, because Billy is right in that the Gospel of Barnabas does deny the crucifixion. It
Right.
does in
Right,
its
right.
text.
But
And
he
so in
was
that
saying
sense,
right.
I would agree with it. And it seems to be the Gospel of Barnabas is not a clear text. And so it seems to be influenced by Islamic rhetoric because
Oh,
it kind of
interesting.
has a defense. It has a denial of the crucifixion and a defense of Muhammad being in the Bible. So it's
Wait,
clearly influenced by later Islamic rhetoric to some degree because the Quran claims that Muhammad is foretold in the Torah and the Injil, in the Gospel. And so Muslims are kind of obligated to find those things. And so there are a number of arguments that they make which are very problematic and just not that don't make sense. But the Gospel of Barnabas appears to have been influenced by the rhetoric of this Islamic polemic to some degree or another. So is it written by Muslims? It could have been, but once again, it's not clear within the text, so I wouldn't go as far as saying that's the case. But the reason why Muslims use it is A, because it does have a very straightforward denial of the crucifixion, and B, it actually plays well into some of the already preconceived ideas about who Muhammad is and about what the Islamic sources say about Muhammad being predicted in the Bible.
interesting.
Get my voice heard. That's what really matters. But I'm going to break down the Sinai Bible tonight, and I'm going to break down the Gospel of Jesus' wife and some other things tonight as well. I'm going to break them down the way that I wanted to talk on that video, but never got a chance to say anything. And then what they did was they're pretty slick. So every time I had something really important to say or a deep question to ask, Defendant number 2 video would just magically disconnect. Boop, he's off again. Oh man, he's off again. I don't know what happened. The first time it happened, I was like, that's strange because it didn't happen when he was talking, and his video was very clear and crisp, like almost 4K. Then he gets back into the live feed, to the whatever app they were using. I'm not sure what kind of app it was. He's back on. He's dialed back in. Now I'm trying to ask my question. I'm getting overridden with other text, other words from Defendant number 1. He's overriding what I'm trying to say, everything I've got to ask. He's talking over me. I'm the person that's there supposed to be in this debate. I can't even get a word in. And as soon
Okay, really quick. Me and my team produced this. Not true. If you watch the unedited full debate on Wesley's channel, you will see not only is that not accurate, the inverse is actually the truth. Wesley's camera cut out within the first 2 minutes of the interview starting or the conversation starting. So you're telling me the gang member who was excited to create a whatever Billy said, Wesley, defendant number 2, excited to debate and debunk Billy, would be cutting out within the first minutes of the debate. This is just purely false. He does cut out later on, but it's after the first whole hour. And all the important stuff, for the most part, I mean, not necessarily, but a lot of the important stuff was covered. And Billy had, like we said, he had many opportunities to give his opinions. So Any comments to that, Wesley? Were you behind the scenes unplugging?
I was not. Every time my internet connection dislocated, I was praying, praying
Oh.
that it would come back.
Oh.
Um, yeah, I mean, I would just say like, go watch the video. You can clearly see I'm giving Billy the floor to articulate his positions. I'm asking him clarifying questions. I want him to explain himself.
Right.
So
Right.
it's
And you ask clarifying questions too, like, hey, are you referring to this? Is this what you mean? Like
yeah.
that's not an attack. You're really trying to get down to his sources.
I mean, I'm just sitting there patiently, just quiet, just okay. Just you can see me. I'm just sitting there. Then all of a sudden, I have something powerful to say in a response to say, boop, disconnects. Video disconnects right when I start talking again. No more video. Video feed gone. I'm like, this is crazy. Now I see what's going on. This is an actual setup because every time he would come back and start talking dogmatically and talking all this garbage, he would then pick up his cup and do this and give a smirk. So I saw then at that moment, I realized, oh, this is a contrived setup video to make me look like I'm some type of dummy and I don't know what I'm talking about. So they can go bragging to all their Christian buddies and friends in their cult and, oh, he didn't know the answer to these 2 questions. Not really. I try to hold off at having faith that maybe Mark wouldn't be involved in something like this. 3rd time happens again, disconnects the video feed. 4th time happens again, disconnects the video feed. 5th time happens again, disconnects the video feed. Only when I'm talking. And I realized after the 5th time, this is bullcrap. And I said, Mark, this is garbage, man. What you guys, this is a setup. This is ridiculous. Every time I have something to say, he's disconnecting man. I could see him literally disconnecting his video manually. And only one time I got to ask a couple of questions. I could see him on his screen on Chat GPT trying to look for the answer real quick. And he gives some roundabout, ridiculous answer when it came to some of the tablets. And I realized then that this was bogus and unprofessional and something I would never want to be a part of. Absolute total trash. And I told Mark at that moment, I'm leaving, man. I got to go. I have an air conditioning guy coming to my house. I have my mother-in-law coming into town, and something happened too. We have 5 AC units, and I.
Okay. Hold on. Billy never turned to Mark and said, "Wait, this is an ambush. I figured you guys out." That never happened. He was actually respectable with your points, Wesley, and he also told Mark he had a very important meeting that he was going to have to leave after like an hour or so. Air conditioning stuff. Is that an important meeting? Sure, whatever. But he didn't leave because of the way the debate was going. He already forewarned us that he had to leave like in an hour or so. He did give you more time, which was awesome. But the way he's painting this, it's just not rooted in the truth at all.
No. Once again, I just recommend people go watch the video on my YouTube channel and see for yourself. Is what he's talking about emblematic of what takes place in the unedited footage?
Has it hit 1 million views yet, Wesley?
Not quite. I
Getting close?
think it's just below 800,000.
Wow.
So it's not far.
Glory to God, man.
Yeah.
Know which one of them is acting up. All I know is one of the rooms in the house upstairs where she's going to be is hot. So I had to have somebody come over and find out which AC unit out of the 5 was broken. So I'm like, I'm not going to miss this appointment for this trash. This is garbage. So I walk out. I walk out in the middle and I tell them, don't use this. I don't approve this. I never signed a consent form. When you go to a podcast, if you don't know the video etiquette, I'm going to tell you right now. Anytime I show up to any podcast I show up to, Joe Rogan, PBD, I mean, you name it, right? Next Level Soul, wherever I'm at. The first thing you do is you sit down and you sign a release form. That's just basic standard legal. You sign a release form. I didn't sign any kind of release form. I never gave any authorization or consent. Luckily, because that now makes the video illegal to use with my likeness, my face, my voice. Any form, any shape or form. Even if it's just a 10-second clip. Even if it's 1 second of me, I did not consent. Why? Because it's unprofessional, and I knew they were going to utilize it to show me in some type of a negative light for their own self-gain, for some type of clout chasing. But it gets even deeper than that.
Yeah,
it gets even deeper than that, you see?
So I think I can speak to this. It's not unusual to sign a release form on these types of things,
For sure.
but especially for a bigger podcast. However, I've been part of the Apologetics Canada podcast as one of their hosts for 3 going on 4 years now. We don't get our guests to sign legal waiver forms.
Mm.
I think there's some wisdom to that in certain instances. I've also been, I mean, in the past month, I can't tell you how many podcasts I've been a guest host, or not host, sorry, an interviewee on, and I don't think I've ever signed a release form for that kind of situation. So it's not unusual, but to say that this is standard etiquette for podcasts,
No, it's not
I've
true.
never done it. And you can go on wesleyhuff.com, click on podcasts. There are, I don't know how many, dozens of podcasts that I'm, part of, and I have either never asked someone to sign a waiver form or myself signed a waiver form. So I'm sure it makes sense for PBD, for Joe Rogan. I can see
Yes.
that. But
Yes.
in just sort of the more like small setting, Mark has
Waiver.
a following, but it's not like the millions of people that Joe Rogan has.
Right.
We at AC have a following, but once again, nowhere near close to that. Um, and so I think this is a bit of an exaggerated point.
Yeah, it is. And, I have a background in working with, people who have podcasts. My current clients, one of them has a very big podcast, very well-known public figure. And, I mean, he has such close relationships with people. It's just like, hey, like we're gonna do this. This is the expectations. I've signed personally six-figure contracts just on handshakes. It's really up to the people from a legal sense. So again, he's trying to he's kind of pulling the victim card here, in my opinion.
So I walk out. My wife, I get back to the house. I'm extremely pissed off and angry. I can barely breathe. I normally take the elevator upstairs when I was sick in my house. I have an elevator. I normally take the elevator up, but I was so pissed off, and I took the staircase up to the loft where my wife was sitting. And when I got to the top of the staircase, I was so exhausted I couldn't even breathe. I almost dropped down on one knee. She's like, "What's going on? What's happening?" She's like panicking. I told her what's happening to the best of my ability. She got pissed off. She got Mark on the phone right away. My wife is my manager. My wife is my manager. And she called immediately, got him on the phone, said, "Billy doesn't consent to this. We signed a contract with another company to do an actual show called Versus, and with a very prominent figure involved in this, and all the different people from different areas of religion. It's a very organized debate system, and it's going to be a TV series." So I did sign that contract. I didn't know I was going over there to do this kind of debate. I thought we were having a casual conversation on spirituality, and I wasn't really even fully in my right mind. I just almost died a few days before going to his house, literally.
Okay, one small thing. I've been to Billy's house multiple times. He might have an elevator. I've never seen it. I mean, it is like a huge house, so that might not be true, but he knew exactly what he was walking into. Mark told him, gave him Wesley. We're going to talk about Christianity versus your theories. And yeah, that's what happened.
We took advantage of that, which is what happened. I can't say he took advantage of that. I allowed him to take advantage of that because for whatever reason, I was just weak. And sometimes you trust people, especially when you've been around them that long and that much. Whatever the case may be, it happened. She was very upset. She called him. She put a do not consent in immediately, and that ended that call. Then he kept trying to send me messages. He was sending me so many messages, which I'm going to put some text messages on the screen tonight, but I can't put all the text messages on the screen because a lot of it is going into evidence. Because defendant number one is going to be sued for $1 million and possibly even more. But version of the debate, if you want to even call it a debate, I call it a defake. That's what it really was. An unqualified garbage. If somebody who really runs debates would have saw that, they would have laughed at us and said, "What amateurs? This is garbage." That's how crappy it was. But she got him to take the videos down because she really wears the pants in the family. She's really the boss. When she puts her foot down, everything happens. She's the one who makes that family move. Anyway, so that's done. The next day, they do get served with a letter from my attorney. It was a cease and desist, a formal do not consent via a cease and desist. Even though the videos have been taken down, that was already in motion because I contacted our attorney that same night. And when Billy calls, he picks up. I don't care what time of the day it is. I don't care if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. So the video goes out to the editor. That's defendant number 3. Defendant number 3. I sort of asked you a question tonight. Are you nervous? He's got nothing. He's got nothing on me. That's what you said. He's got nothing on me. He just paid me. He paid me before, but he's got nothing on me. Oh, I got something on you. We're going to break that down tonight. We got something on you, defendant number 3. You have no idea what kind of hot water you put yourself in. Like you have, I mean, for a businessman, you got to be dumber than a box of rocks. Like you didn't realize what you were doing. Number one, was illegal. You don't realize the financial damages that I'm able to get now. And then the doxing that you attempted to do, that you tried to delete. You didn't realize that we had already copied all of that and logged it into evidence. And that we've already won cases with that same exact doxing file that you used, which is fake information, as you'll see tonight when I showcase why. And I'm going to put some of the cases on my screen tonight. You, my friend, defendant number 3, are going to spend a lot of money. All the money, well, you only made probably $50, $60 on YouTube. So you know your Instagram isn't even monetized. So you made no money, except for the money that you got paid by the defendant number 1 to edit the video. Well, she pays you because you're his editor. And whatever this cult paid you as a bribe to get involved with them and whatever. But I'm going to break that all down in a minute. But what you did was you gave me an easy case. Like the easiest case out of all of these cases is actually yours. So all this you were saying on video tonight about you got nothing to worry about, I got nothing on you. No, we got a lot on you. You're the one we have the most on. And, you know, I know you're sleeping on your mom's couch up there in Michigan, but you're going to be sleeping there a lot longer because you won't be able to afford your own place anytime soon. Okay.
Okay. So I wouldn't say he's wrong. I think if there is a case, it's probably against me. I will say though, everything I used in my video to expose him, I was very careful with my wording, and everything I used was public information you can find on like the Broward County website about Billy's questionable past, handful of other things, fraud, changing his name, opening bank accounts in other people's names, opening credit cards in other people's names. You know, this is all, I mean, you got to dig a little, but it's there. Second thing is, yeah, I actually don't live with my mom. And I had no problem with people who live with their moms. I am a little old school. Like if you got to live with your mom for a little bit longer to get on your feet financially while you know, save for your marriage or your house, nothing wrong with that. I did live with my mom for, I don't know, how long do you think I lived with mom? We lived with mom. 6 months? Yeah, 6 months when I transitioned from moving back home from Florida to Michigan, and I bought a house. It's a 5-bedroom house. I did a funny Instagram video sleeping everywhere in it because this is just funny. It's just not true. And yeah,
I'll say something about like I did get in contact with, they actually reached out to me, someone who's involved in American media and copyright law.
oh,
And they reached out to me and they said, in case you didn't know, the use of recordings of individuals, including public figures like Mr. Carson, if he knew he was being recorded for public podcast and consented to this by coming to the scheduled recording session, knowing the name of the person who was going on and he was speaking with, and the purpose of the subject in the recording, then none of the footage can be either claimed to belong to him or has any doesn't belong to him. She says this is a well-litigated area. Celebrities have often done things on camera in public that they have wished were forgotten. Consent cannot be rescinded ex post facto. So Billy's claim that this footage is illegal it's just completely inaccurate and false.
Win this judgment against you. So let's get into this. Before I get into defendant number 3, let's go over a little bit more about this. Yeah, I'm gonna save him because that's like icing on the cake. I'm gonna save him. That's like icing on the freaking cake, man. Let me get into a little bit more about the deepfake. Let me get into this deepfake a little bit. Okay. I told you what was happening in this thing, and a couple of the questions that had been brought up about the Sinai Bible and the Gospel of Jesus' wife. What defendant number 2 has tried to make 100,000 videos out of nothing. And what's so funny is his little henchmen and his little people that were already in the cult and already far left. You're ending Billy Carson's career on these 2 questions. Really?
I can't figure out why he continues to call me far left.
Dude, it's probably because you're Canadian. Like, I don't know.
I'm not far left. I mean, in Canadian terms, I'm if I'm described as anything, it's far right. Now I'm not far right either.
Yeah.
I'm conservative,
Right,
but
right.
Canadians are very, very liberal on average, I think. But I
Yeah, I
am
mean,
not.
you guys are bordering on socialism from what I can see.
We're pretty concerningly leftist country, especially with our current government, which is
Yeah, man, like the stuff you told me about the healthcare, like that stuff's wild. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Anyways,
crazy.
different subject, but I'm not far left by any stretch.
Let me see. Let me go back to my live chat real quick before I pull up this PowerPoint. Where are we at now? I'm at 11,499 people. The most I've ever had was 5,000. You guys doubled my popularity on a live video in one day. Thank you so much. All the dark energy, all your listeners and all your followers and all your cult people and all your people that are in your organizations that are coming to watch my video with that dark energy. How are we going to see the fall of Billy Carson? That's dark energy, that frequency that's coming here. You see this behind me? That's the face of God. God's not a man flying around with a magic wand granting wishes. God is a frequency, and it's your job to tune in. Y'all didn't tune in. See, I'm tuned in. So all this dark energy that you're bringing toward me, I've alchemically converted that energy into money. That's exactly what I've done.
Ooh.
So
for any occultists, that is so disrespectful to any occultist right there. Because he's showing his unethical use of sacred technology for money. And if you're an occultist, you know the ramifications of that.
what I'm watching tonight. And then I'm going to get back into defendant number 3 and break him all the way down. I'm going to break him all the way down, guys. He actually got on a video tonight on some show, like he's some type of superhero out here. This guy has 3 likes per post on social media, and he started a social media marketing company. We actually hired this guy, and his work was so bad we had to get rid of him. We had to fire him. He was great in other areas that we had things we had done with him in the past, which I will go over. And I'm going to read a lot of text messages from defendant number 3 as well. Tons and tons of text messages I'm going to read.
Quick comment here. I do own a social media company. My team does not do anything for my brand. So anything you see me post, I hope you don't think it's actually a reflection of my company. I actually do that very intentionally for a lot of reasons. One of which is to send a message to my clients that, look, we're going to make your stuff look good and professional, but what's more important to make good content is the context. I mean, if you look at any of my thumbnails on my YouTube, they look like a child made them, and I'm doing that intentionally. So I've always done this with my brand, and it's always been like a, hey, look, because I was a coach at one time and I only had like 15,000 followers, but I was able to make $500,000 my first year as a coach without having good content because I understand marketing. So I do that very intentionally as an example for my clients. So he's wrong again, and he did fire us. It wasn't like a intense thing, and he's not wrong there. Like, we didn't do an overly good job. We didn't do a bad job, but you know, my creative directing versus Billy's and content he was making, we just weren't aligned there. Like, I wanted to show different sides of him, and he just wanted us to pull clips, and that's not really like, there was just a disconnect. So that's a little right there.
And I'm going to expose his bed of lies and fabrication. And then I'm going to break down his doxing. And I'm going to show you why he's the easiest case for us to win. And he'll be sleeping on his mom's couch just a little bit longer after I get done breaking this down. Okay? Because I want to get a little bit more into the deepfake and finally get a chance to say, defendant number 3, very interesting guy. Very, very interesting guy. He's one of the key figures in this whole operation. He's like the linchpin, if I can use that term.
The linchpin.
Good friend,
The
my good friend
linchpin,
Terrence
not
Howard.
a
He's like the
linchpin. He's the linchpin.
I'm the linchpin.
Pin, because linchpins also have to do with energy. So he's been giving this darkness energy and feeding it. And we'll get to the foundation of his agenda eventually, most likely through discovery. But I'm hypothesizing that his failing business structure and his failing business model put him in a situation where, and his lack of ability to do any real internet marketing and to gain any real following. He couldn't even build his own following. that he was offered in some way, shape, or form some type of money from this cult organization. Who?
Okay, so one of the key things about my company is that, like, I was just having this conversation with Aubrey Marcus yesterday. I was like, dude, you have 700,000 followers. You don't need more followers. You actually need to change what you're selling if you're not making money. So my company does not focus on virality per se. That's an aspect of getting bigger. Like in the case of Wesley, I've kind of been a little bit behind the scenes consulting him, if you will, because I do know how to capitalize on opportunities like this with him and Billy that happen once in a lifetime, twice if you're lucky. But he's not wrong to say my company has been struggling. You know, I was when I was 23 years old, I was making $60,000 a month. I'm 29 now. It's the same company I run, but because of my transition in beliefs and working with people like Billy, like Joe Dispenza, you know, all these really big names, I stopped taking on those clients. Actually, I still get referrals and I just don't even answer the emails at this point. So he's not wrong. My income has dramatically dropped. But funny enough, from doing what I'm doing, I actually, uh, I just onboarded last week 2 new clients, both Christians, and they reached out because they were excited to see me stand up for the truth and they want to leverage my company and my social media skills to help them. So yes, I don't make nearly as much money as I used to. So he's not wrong there, but it's more so the fact that I've had a change in my beliefs and I no longer want to get behind people like Billy. So that's just some clarity there.
Now in contact with the proper authorities, several authorities, which I'll talk about one more time before we end this live, those exact authorities. And he utilized that potential revenue. I don't know if he did, so I'm saying potential revenue that he got from the bribing or whatever the offer was. It was very enticing to him to bring the popularity to him. He really needed it so badly. And so by
one thing, I know I'm making jokes, but there's been no bribes. I actually came to Christ earlier this year, and my priest and other people close to me advised me, you don't need to broadcast this, man. Just get right with God. So in my heart, I felt like I'm going to yield to my elders because I have made really dumb decisions through my whole life thinking I know it all. Like I do and have struggled with pride. I won't even say I haven't, you know, because I have achieved a lot of things in my life at a young age, but I took an entire year, and Billy actually wasn't going to be the first person I exposed. I had other people on my radar. But when this whole thing happened, and I've been praying to God since January on like, what do I do with all this information I have? When this all happened, I was like, okay. I talked to my priest about it, and he said, he encouraged me not to, but he didn't say don't do it. And he's not saying that because he wants me to protect these people, but there's like a spiritual warfare element to this all. And the Orthodox, I think, have a really good grasp of that, which was kind of why I leaned that way. But I just want to let everybody know, like, people think I'm trying to like monetize Jesus. You can't buy anything from me. My company doesn't even have a website. I don't do coaching anymore. Like, so I just really want to make that very clear that I've been praying about this exact moment since January, and Billy was not my first person I was going to do. It was going to be somebody else. And when this whole thing with him and Wesley and this all went down and he sent me a cease and desist, my video was a response to Billy's first punch, if you will. So just want to clarify those things.
Yeah. Let me also say no bribes.
No bribes.
And,
yes. No bribes.
no threats.
Didn't get paid. No threats.
Because, yeah.
Well, actually, I got threats. I got threatened.
Well, no threats so we kind of skipped over some of the stuff with Defendant #1, but and I think there's an issue with the continuity of the narrative that Billy articulates here, because he did seem to kind of express at one point that I was threatening Mark to get this out there. I have not threatened Mark. I've not threatened anybody, Billy or otherwise, and I would condemn anybody who is threatening, but I have paid nothing. I work for a non-profit charitable organization. We don't make profit. We have no profits. And so that I think that should just be made clear. I work on the complete and utter donations of people. That's how I live. I live because I work for a charitable organization here in Canada that is dependent on the charitable giving in donations of other people. So I do not have hundreds of thousands of dollars to purchase bots or anything else. In fact, when Billy said that during this live stream, my wife kind of leaned over jokingly and said, "Hey, man, we really could have used that $100,000. You shouldn't spend it there."
Yeah, and for those of you, for the record, if you feel inspired by Wesley and you feel like he's doing good work, him and his organization is at Canada Apologetics, you can actually donate to him, and you can find that info at, is it wesleyhuff.com?
Yeah, it's
Okay, yeah.
available on
And
SCF.com.
he's too humble to tell you this, so I'll tell you it. And I think as Christians, this man, I've been in his ear. I said, look, there's no reason you shouldn't be getting paid for this at a higher level in my beliefs. And I think he's done such a net positive for the communities as a whole that I didn't even know. Like, I didn't know you could donate to him. So I just want to let all my followers know and everybody else watching, you can donate to him. And, every little bit helps. So I really encourage you to do that.
I appreciate that. I will say that if people do find it in their heart and mind to donate, if you go to my website, it'll send you on to Apologetics Canada's website. Just a note of sort of specificity there. If you go to the donations page and you're from the United States, make sure you click the U.S. donations button, because at that point it'll go through our connection in the States, which will be able to get you a charitable receipt. If you don't do that, you cannot get a tax refundable charitable receipt. If that's not a big deal for you, then whatever. But this is we're a charitable organization, so you can actually file that on your taxes.
Oh, beautiful. And yeah, if you're an entrepreneur, the end of the year is coming. So you need to make some donations. Now is a great time. I will be making some donations. And I encourage everybody listening too, because Wes Huff is out here.
From the bribing or whatever the offer was, it was very enticing to him to bring the popularity to him. He really needed it so badly. And so by that offer, whatever offers they made him to get involved in the situation and to cultivate and to manipulate Defendant 1, he successfully did that to Defendant 1. And he was able to acquire this illegal footage, and I do mean illegal, and then he had a decision to make. Am I going to utilize it, or am I going to do the right thing and let it go? But he had an incentive. There was an extra incentive for Defendant number 3 to take this footage and put it out. He has a direct connection in some way, shape, or form to Defendant number 1, which we will find that out in discovery. The money that you thought you were making and the popularity you thought you were making is all going to be spent on attorney's fees. And I don't care if I win or lose. I just want you to spend money. You see? Let's see if this is it here.
Yikes. That was really dark to me. And it's also, I think, a slap lawsuit, and Florida's an anti-slap state. So no case. That throws everything out right there, according to lawyers, allegedly.
In fact, not only would the case be thrown out, but any legal fees that are actually filed, if my understanding is correct in what I looked up, the judge would actually make Billy pay for any financial costs that were incurred during the process of this thing. So whatever fees myself, Anton, or Mark would have had to pay if Billy actually tried to push this to being litigated, Billy would have to pay for our legal fees.
So there's that. In terms of the doorbell footage that I did leak, he's right. I did have an extra incentive. My incentive was to show people allegedly the psychology behind this person. And I did that very intentionally because all of my old clients and teachers like Billy operate in that same spirit, and they fool a lot of people because they spend millions of dollars cleaning up their track record of all their bad stuff they do. So I was like, well, this is going to probably open some eyes. Like, why are you knocking at the dude's door at 2:30 in the morning over a debate? Like, it's like a respectable debate. Just a lot of weird stuff. So say that. The other thing I'll say is like, I don't want to be too dramatic, but demons are very prideful. And yeah, I see personally in this, I see there's a spiritual warfare happening to Billy in my personal beliefs.
So one of the questions that was brought up was the information about the Sinai Bible, which has a lot of differences than the King James Version of the Bible. It's also called the Codex Sinaiticus. And what I had said in a few podcasts, which probably only 2 or 3 podcasts I had mentioned, and of course reels and clips were made and they were then edited and put out all over the place, was that in the Sinai Bible, it appeared that Jesus had never been crucified. I said it's quite possible that Jesus was never crucified. Not once anywhere they say Jesus was never crucified. It said quite possible that Jesus was never crucified.
That's not true.
Yeah, that's incorrect. And it's demonstrably incorrect. There are so many clips. In fact, I posted kind of a stream of clips of Billy saying that the Sinai Bible denies the crucifixion. Is it, Jesus was crucified? Well, no, that's not in the Sinai Bible, that kind of thing. And then I've seen people dig up others. So there are ones that I didn't even find that people are posting of Billy multiple times saying that it outright denies the crucifixion. And so Billy did say that. He said that in this interaction, and he's said it multiple times in the past, and it's just an incorrect assertion. So, and I mean, here's the thing. Anybody who's studied the history of the Bible, if you're comparing Codex Sinaiticus, a 4th century codices, to the 1611 King James Bible, a 17th century English translation, that's not apples to oranges. It's apples to orchards. You don't do that. It doesn't make any sense. So, of course, there are differences between an English translation done, over a millennia later. Like what it reveals is that Billy doesn't know anything about the history of the Bible. If this is kind of the way that he's approaching it, because you just don't do it this way. Never mind the fact that he's wrong about Codex Sinaiticus.
What are these passages here, James? If you could pull up
Yeah, so that's the longer ending of Mark. So here's the thing. Billy is correct in this statement. This just has nothing to do with the original the claim. The original claim is that the crucifixion is missing from Codex Sinaiticus, which is outright false. In fact, the crucifixion is in arguably every book of the New Testament, and Codex Sinaiticus has every book of the New Testament. What he's talking about there are what are referred to as textual variants, which are differences within the manuscript tradition. Now, once again, if Billy had bothered to Google me, he would have found multiple videos that I've done on these very passages. I have done whole videos on the inauthenticity of the longer ending of Mark. I have done whole videos on the story of the woman caught in adultery. In fact, I have multiple times in the AC podcast and in other platforms recommended this particular book by Tommy Wasserman, which is the definitive book on the textual evidence regarding the story of the woman caught in adultery, which, by the way, I do not think is authentic to the Gospel of John, nor do the vast majority of critical scholars in my field. But that has nothing to do with his claim about Codex Sinaiticus denying the crucifixion. It honestly doesn't. I am well aware of the literature, and I would cite it more than just putting Biblical Archaeological Review, which is not a citation. It's just a source, but if you're going to cite that, you need to put what the article actually is. But there's great, I mean, this is comprehensive to the point where, like, I just opened up to a random page, and this is the text up here, and these are all the citations at the bottom of the page. Like, there are more citations than there are actual, like, text.
Right.
Like, that's how scholarship is done.
Wow.
So it's just silly. And even actually,
How about the Luke one?
The phrase "and he was carried up into heaven," describing Jesus' ascension. Um, I can't speak to that one specifically. I'd have to look it up. But I mean, phrases are missed all the time
For
in
sure.
scribal. Uh, this is often done by accident. I have a video on my YouTube channel where I describe a textual variant that's very common with scribes that's called homoteleuton, which is it's just a Latin word that means similar endings. So we do this in English sometimes. If you are copying something and you come to the end of a sentence and say the word at the end of the sentence is the, and you're looking at the page, you go back to what you're writing and you write the sentence, and then you go back to the source you're looking at and say two sentences down also ends with the word the. If
Mm.
you see the second the instead of the first the and think that that's where you left off, then and then start writing from there, you will effectively lose a sentence or two.
Mm.
And that happens with scribes because
I
people
see.
are handwriting these
Right,
things
right,
and
right,
they're
right,
often
right.
doing it by candlelight.
Oh,
So
wow.
like these mistakes happen, right? These we don't need to insert nefarious intentions when scribes either miss something or add something. The vast majority of the time, 99% of the time with these scribal issues, it's completely understandable. We can explain it almost immediately by looking at it and looking at what could very well be the case.
Mm.
So if Luke 24:51 in Codex Sinaiticus misses that, I mean, that doesn't deny the ascension. It
Right,
just
right.
mentions that that particular phrase in the Greek is missing. Do you have the clip from the Can I Trust the Bible series?
Yeah,
Would you be able to pull that up? Yeah.
yeah.
So this is episode 2 of the Can I Trust the Bible series we did, where my colleague Andy asks me specifically about this issue and we explain it. I'm pretty sure I put Codex Sinaiticus on the screen.
And one thing I'll say too, before I play this clip, is that, this is where it really saddens me, the mindset that so many people who are conspiracy theories live in. Their worldview is so broken, they think all of this stuff is conspiracy. Like if it's just an honest error, they're like, oh no, 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 it's a conspiracy. They're trying to cover stuff up, they're trying to change stuff. And I lived in that mindset for years, and it's really sad because there is genuine mistakes. There are genuine people. Not everything's a conspiracy. Not everything's a lie. Like there is truth, capital T truth. And yeah. Okay, so we're gonna play this clip now.
Add a citation note at the end of the page. Okay, the earlier we go and the more we look at the different manuscripts, we can see that this was added at this point. And again, we're going to footnote that and say that shouldn't be there. And the ancient scribes did their own version of footnoting. When we discovered the story of the woman caught in adultery in the Gospel of John is missing from our earliest papyri, it didn't blow up the way we understood that story. Scribes all along have been noting some copies that we have it, some copies that we have don't have it. And so they're adding little scribal notations to say, we're not sure about this text, we're not sure about that text, but they would include things, even if they weren't sure whether it was part of the original or not. No, we have not 100% of the text, we have 110% of the text. Because what that means is that even though things were added, the scribes were so tenacious to include everything that the original text is in there. And it's kind of like a puzzle. If you had a puzzle with 100,000 pieces and you opened it up and you found that you actually had not 100,000 pieces, but 100,100 pieces, once you start to put the puzzle together, you can see where the image is. You can see where pieces were added from another puzzle by accident, or maybe that someone came along and they added extra pieces. Once the picture starts to come together, it's really clear to figure out, well, what does and doesn't belong. And that's kind of like the text of the Bible. Once we put together the pieces of the text of the Bible, we can see this piece doesn't belong, this piece does belong. That being the case, Wes, why do the scribes make some of these
You
changes?
can pause it there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it, man. This is for me, the final step in accepting Jesus as Lord was the debunking of the falsehoods of the Gnostic Gospels, but also the truth of the Bible. because even though I started to not believe in the soundness of the Gnostic Gospels through a lot of your content, Wesley, I was still like, okay, well, can I really trust what's in the Bible though? Because I was listening to people like Aaron Apke and Aubrey Marcus and these guys who are very intelligent and my friends and good guys, but they believe in gnosis. I mean, they believe in like a demigod created this earth, and these are all things I used to believe too. So I was like, okay, those aren't true from what Wesley puts out here in the world. But then there's still a hurdle for me to get over because of my messed up brain and wicked mind and heart that's just tainted and messed up. That is like, okay, well, can I really trust the Bible? And that's what your whole series was on. And I know there's more parts of that coming out. So anybody who's not on board, and even if you are on board with Christianity, go check out those videos. The Q&A is really good too that you guys did. So
Yeah. Apologetics Canada on YouTube. We just put those out recently.
You should ask them if you can put those on your page. I think that would be greatly beneficial as well. Just side note.
Or he might not have been crucified, depending on what podcast I was on. So this question came up during the defake as not a question in a way that it would be asked in a real debate, but it was an attack from the very beginning because they thought they had answers that would debunk whatever I said in a podcast somewhere one day. So the Codex Sinaiticus, often referred to as the Sinai Bible, is a 4th century Greek manuscript of the Bible. In contrast, the King James Version, KJV, is an English translation completed in 1611. Comparing these two involves examining differences in textual context, translation choices, and theological interpretations. And so here's the textual variations. Scholars estimate that there are approximately 14,800 differences between.
You can probably skip that at this point because we've addressed it.
Right.
But just once again, I mean, if this is what Billy really wanted to have said, it still would not have gone well for him. Like, in one sense, I was like, let's talk about textual variation. Like, let's talk about. I mean, that's once again, that's what I do.
Yeah, he can't.
I've collated manuscripts. I've counted variances in sentences in manuscripts. I'm more than willing to get into the weeds on that, but it's just not that line of argumentation would have worked as well as the line of argumentation that Billy actually did bring up in the debate. Yeah, but we can probably go on to the next section.
7, describing Jesus' ascension, is missing. Biblical Archaeology Review. Strip of land, and we're going to build mini homes on there for homeless people with all the money. Every single penny of it. We're going to document it. We're going to post it. We're going to turn your darkness into light. Translate.
Billy says he's donated 12 million to various organizations over the years. I haven't seen many receipts personally, so I don't know about those.
This KJV, translators worked from a limited set of late medieval Greek manuscripts, primarily the Textus Receptus and Hebrew texts available in the early 17th century. In contrast, the Codex Sinaiticus is an earlier manuscript, reflecting a different textual tradition. These distinct source materials contribute to differences in wording and interpretation between the two versions. Theological implications. The variations between the Codex Sinaiticus and the KJV.
Do you want to say
correct.
something? Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's right. I just don't think it means what he thinks it means, and that's the problem. He doesn't know what the Textus Receptus is. The Textus Receptus are a collection of printed editions of the Greek New Testament that were the received texts. In fact, there's more than one. They're Texti Recepti, because at the time that the King James translators were producing the King James Bible between 1603 and 1611, they had 7 editions of the Greek New Testament that they were working with, okay? The 5 editions of Desiderius Erasmus, in fact...
Here he goes. Here he goes.
This is the third edition. This is the third edition of Desiderius Erasmus's Textus Receptus.
Can you show the cover?
Yeah, so this is the 1522...
Oh, cool.
Figure out where my camera is. 1522, Erasmus, Greek Latin New Testament. And this is the primary volume, along with the updates by a guy named Stephanus and then a guy named Beza, that the King James translators were using. So these were the Texti Recepti. And yes, they are derived from a later, different stream of manuscript traditions than something like Codex Sinaiticus, but this is irrelevant. This does not mean what Billy thinks it means. So it's just, unfortunately, what he's doing is he's pulling in information. I don't know where he's getting it from, but he's pulling information in that I think he thinks makes it sound like he knows what he's talking about.
Have led to differing theological understandings. For example, the absence of certain passages in the Codex Sinaiticus, such as the longer ending of Mark, affects narratives concerning the resurrection and ascension of Jesus. These differences highlight the importance of textual criticism and biblical studies to understand the development and transmission of biblical texts over time. While it's challenging to specify the exact number of words translated differently between the Codex Sinaiticus and the KJV due to their distinct textual basis and translation methodologies, the estimated 14,800 differences encompass both minor and significant variations that have implications for biblical interpretation and theology. You can tell this was written for me. No, I'm taking this from the source, Mr. Whoever you are in the live chat. Of course, this is cut and pasted from the direct source, from actual academic books. I'm not giving.
Okay, this is not taken from academic books, allegedly. This looks like ChatGPT to me, or some form of that.
Yeah, and it's not saying what Billy thinks it's saying, and
Right.
I mean, I've done text critical work. This is not a proof positive for anything he thinks it's saying.
Reading academic books. Come on now, tune in, get your head on right. This is not basic IQ stuff. The next thing was about the gospel of Jesus' wife. That question came up. In podcasts, I have been noted as saying, it's quite possible, I said they discovered the gospel of Jesus' wife, fact. And then I go on to say, in maybe 3 podcasts, it's quite possible that Jesus never died, that he may have been married. And his Merovingian bloodline could still be on the planet till this very day. My wording is very specific and basic. Guys are jumping up and down over there. Oh my goodness, we got to debunk. We got to go ahead and do what you got to do. Listen, man, I'm the king. I'm the GOAT. Okay. You guys are just riding on my coattail. You have no real knowledge. You guys know nothing. It's just a whole bunch of heretical, talk for looking for clout chasing and a whole bunch of stuff you guys are doing there, just trying to make it look attractive, but it's really just a bunch of trash. It has no real value for anybody. Nothing there you guys are doing is uplifting anybody. Nothing there you guys are doing is changing anyone's life. Nothing you people are doing over there is helping anyone. You guys are spending tens of thousands of dollars on fake bots and fake YouTube accounts and sending people, hordes of people to attack and show their true Christian colors.
Well, it changed my life. Wesley's work changed my life. Christianity changed my life. And if you read the comments under Wesley's interview with Billy, the conversation, there's one that has like over 7,000 upticks from somebody who was an atheist who's now questioning their entire worldview to find Christ and maybe say, holy crap, maybe this is all true. There's something that happens that I went through that for non-believers. You get to a moment of actual fear because you realize, holy crap, it might be true. And if that's the case, you can't live the way you're living anymore because there will be judgment. And some people think that's like, oh, you're giving into fear. Like, no, like a lot of my Gnostic friends, like, why would you fear God? Well, you would fear God because he's the one in control and you better hope you have his favor. That's kind of how I see it. So this, it's absolutely wild. So I don't want to talk too much. I want to keep playing. So Billy's now going to play a clip from something with Karen. What's her last name?
Karen King.
King. Okay. And this is old, correct? This was before she said it was a fraud.
Yeah, this is a fraud. Yeah, this was before. I mean, there were questions about the gospel of Jesus' wife very early on. A lot of paleographers kind of highlighted some red flags, and the consensus was not on the side of this being legitimate. Karen King jumped the gun very quickly, and there have been other cases of that have happened in the last few years. There was a manuscript of the Gospel of Mark, a fragment of the Gospel of Mark that was in 2009 came up, and they were claiming that it was first century. And one of my mentors early on said, like, hey, Wes, I know this looks exciting, but an unpublished manuscript might as well be a non-existent manuscript. And so that's kind of what happened here, is the same sort of thing. It wasn't released, and there was very little actually examination being done on it by the time that Karen King actually came out and vouched for it. But Karen King, yes, eventually did admit that all the evidence, and actually Billy puts that up on the screen, all the evidence was on the side of that being fake.
Crazy. Crazy. All right, so we'll play this really quick.
Leaders over a recently discovered piece of ancient papyrus that makes a reference to Jesus Christ having a wife. Karen King, an expert in the history of Christianity, unveiled the 4th century artifact, which she says is the only existing ancient text quoting Jesus explicitly referring to having a wife, whom he identifies as Mary. King says the fragment of Coptic script is a copy of a gospel, probably written in Greek in the 2nd century.
But what is, of course, exciting about this fragment is that it's the first case we have of Christians claiming that Jesus had a wife.
He goes on to talk about, I can't play too much of it because obviously I don't want to get a copyright strike, but it goes on to talk about the fact that this gospel of Jesus' wife, this text has been examined, it's been looked at, it's been researched, it's been everything you can think of by dozens of academics from all over the world, and everyone's looking at this thing, and it's creating a big stir, and it's creating a big woo-ha in the whole Christian community because it could potentially upturn the apple cart and everything else. But there's also some talk about it. Maybe this thing is real, maybe it's not real, maybe it's fake.
Well, it reads like something out of a Dan Brown thriller. A Harvard professor is contacted by an anonymous collector with a tantalizing artifact, a small scrap of papyrus covered with an ancient text, making the first known reference to the wife of Jesus. The notion that Jesus might have been married sparked controversy in the Christian world. And I'm joined now by the Harvard scholar at the center of it. Karen King is a professor of early Christian history at the Harvard Divinity School. And welcome.
Thank you.
So we're very intrigued about this collector. That's something that you have kept very secret. Would that let
If you pause it there,
this,
Anton?
you could say where this originated?
Yeah, I think a few things about this. These clips are more than a decade old. Like I said, these are before everything kind of came out. So I think that is relevant. The fact that Karen King herself admitted that these are all fake, that is relevant.
Billy thinks she was paid off.
Yeah, I don't know by who. I mean, she has her
maybe
academic.
the Vatican and big. I mean, Christianity does hold a lot of power.
Right.
I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but this is the mind of a conspiracy theorist. Well, she was just paid off.
Sure. I mean, I think also, which is relevant. I know this is a minor tidbit, but Billy has continually said in all the clips that I have referred to, and I didn't mention this in the debate. I didn't want to because it felt a little bit nitpicky, but he always refers to the Harvard Seminary. Harvard does not have a seminary. A seminary is a theological institution that trains people for ministry. Harvard has a divinity school.
Yeah,
a divinity school is a graduate level college that teaches theology, but is not training pastors, priests, etc. So,
but why would they reference this if it's a known fraud in there?
What do you mean by that?
Because doesn't the divinity school have reference to this gospel of Jesus's wife in their school?
Yeah, so they were the ones that brought it forth because Karen King was the last person that kind of ended up with it. But my point in saying that is that Billy continues to use the wrong term for what Harvard is. It does not have a seminary. So yes, the Harvard Divinity School where Karen King works is the one that originally announced this, but it's not a seminary any more than, I don't know, like referring to a surgeon as a pediatrician is a completely different thing.
Well, if we knew actually more about the find itself, who found it in Egypt, how, the history of it since the find, that would be of enormous use. When things are found by professional archaeologists, that gives us really great information. But I think that a lot of people who own these things and who trade in them are anonymous. And so for me, the issue about knowing his identity, I don't think makes any difference. What really matters is the kind of scientific testing that's been done and that kind of work.
So this scrap is tiny.
It goes on to talk about how much scientific testing has been done. She really believes, and she's gone on dozens of interviews about this, that this thing was real. Now, maybe it's not real. Does that even matter? The fact that in my podcast or podcasts that I've been in, I actually blatantly say that it could be that Jesus was married and he may have had a wife and even had children. Now, why would I still have that opinion after academics come out and try to say that this thing isn't real? Well, let me talk about that for a minute. Let me pull back up my my PowerPoint. Hold on a second.
So we just pause it there.
Karen King was explicitly pressured into stating.
I'll put that back up on the screen. I don't think we need to listen to him reading it, but if you put back up on the screen, I think there are a few things in here. Now, this does look like a ChatGPT response. I don't know if you use ChatGPT, but this does look like a response. If you put in
that's how his whole thing is. That's how I can identify. It's definitely AI.
Yeah. So, but there are a number of key things that are said in here, which actually indicate that, academic pressure. Reputable scholars publish detailed examinations and institutions emphasize rigorous standards, this overwhelming consensus could have created a sense of academic obligation for King to align with the evidence. Yes. And that's what you did, right? Like, of course you would do that.
God.
Academics change their mind all the time based on the evidence. That's just reputable, honest scholarship. And then the last one says King's acknowledgement that the evidence presses in the direction of a forgery could also stem from her commitment to scholarly rigor rather than external coercion. In other words, she has a commitment to be honest about all the evidence that is presented to her rather than lying about it to save face. Yes, of course. That's what it says. I don't know why Billy would put this up. This does not communicate what he's saying.
Well, this is his team for sure.
It's just it's
Sloppy.
very it's sloppy and it's foolish. Like it's conceivable that indirect pressure arose from the need to maintain the integrity of these institutions. Yes. Because they're not trying to save face. The integrity is based on the evidence. So admitting you're wrong is part of establishing that credibility. If she had doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on it being real when everyone else everywhere is saying it's fake, that does not contribute to the integrity of the institution. It's a mark against it. So I don't think we necessarily need to listen to Billy read all this, but all I say is like, man, it's so unfortunate that he put that up on the screen because all he's communicating. Yeah, and then the Council of Nicaea. Oh boy. Now it's interesting. I don't think he got that. Yeah, let's move on. I don't think he got this from ChatGPT because I have a hard time believing that even ChatGPT would give him this.
Oh, ChatGPT lies, man. That's definitely not. This is this is not out of the realm. I mean, you can give it prompts to lie.
Yeah, I guess. Now, he's trying to argue, that we see examples in other places in church history of people being deceitful to cover up things, and he uses the Council of Nicaea as an example of this. And I mean, I have so much content on the Council of Nicaea. I have like hours of podcast interviews on the Council of Nicaea. My colleague Andy and I, in the next episodes of the Can I Trust the Bible series, are going to go to Iznik, Turkey, where the Council of Nicaea took place this upcoming year, and talk about why we know what the Council of Nicaea actually said is what happened, and address conspiracy theories like Billy's talking about here. Like, I am very well versed in the Council of Nicaea, had nothing to do with any books of the Bible, conclusively. Absolutely. That is a Dan Brown contrived, conceived fabrication.
Who's Dan Brown?
He wrote the Da Vinci Code.
Oh, the movie?
So, yeah, it was a book, and then it got made into a movie. Oh. But it was made up by him. So it appears to have come from another source called the Sonata Convetus, which predates that, which is also just, it's made up. We know what happened at the Council of Nicaea. We do. We have the documents. In fact, I did a recent interview with Julian Dorey, where Julian Dorey actually also brought this up, and we went through the history of the Council of Nicaea.
That's one of your best interviews I've ever seen.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Everybody go watch that interview, especially if you have any background in like paganism or Gnosticism. So good. So
but
good.
This is like entry level. Like, if you put this in an intro class in an undergrad course, you would get a 0. You would get a 0 because none of this is not even remotely, like, there's no semblance of truth to talking about the Council of Nicaea having anything to do with canonical decisions. It did not.
Wow.
It had nothing to do with it. So this is, if Billy's trying to establish credibility, he's doing a very unfortunate job.
This is a video of me speaking in Korean. 안녕하세요, 여러분. 저는 빌리 카슨입니다. 코비든 노랫개로도 알려져 있죠. 만약 여러분이 성장 가능성이 있는 회사에 투자하고 싶다면 저희를 꼭 살펴보셔야 해요. 기억하세요. 1라운드에서는 주가가 주당 1달러였어요. 왜냐하면 저희의 사전 평가액이 2천만 달러였거든요. 스타트업 치고 나쁘지 않죠. 우리는 정말 놀라운 성과를 냈고 몇 달 후에 저희의 사전 평가액이 3천만 달러로 올랐. I don't know how to get on the screen, but me hide that. There you go. Anyway.
Okay, really quick on that point. I think he was doing that to try to say that the interview or the conversation with you, him, and Mark was potentially a deep fake. Like, what was he trying to do there? That was really weird. Super weird.
Yeah, I think he's grasping at straws at this point. Like, it is it a setup? Is it a deep fake?
Right,
Was
which
Mark
is
trying to get this thing out and I was threatening him? Was Mark trying to cover it up? Was Mark on Billy's side? Was Mark on my side? There's no linear flow to the argument. And to throw this out there, at minimum, it's very strange. It doesn't prove anything. This was a deepfake Billy made of himself. So, I mean, great. I don't know what it proves.
So yeah, I was talking Korean. Did you see my mouth? Take a look one more time. 안녕하세요, 여러분. 저는 빌리 카슨입니다. 포비든 노래 prior to that, and then you make a decision for yourself whether you believe these people or not, because I don't believe them. The Council of Nicaea 325 CE and canonical decisions. Canonical was the appropriate language for Scripture, ensuring control. Sound familiar to you? Control over biblical interpretations. The church feared that access to the Bible by common people, the commoners, might undermine clerical authority and foster dissenting interpretations. More manipulation, more contrived garbage. Sound familiar to you? They have a history of doing this. This is how they live. They live off of this garbage. These are their teachers. They're only doing what history has taught them to do in that genre, to lie, steal, and cheat, and buy fake bots and attack people's accounts and threaten kids. Wycliffe's efforts eventually inspired the Protestant Reformation, but during his time, his followers faced persecution and copies of his Bible were destroyed. Anytime a light bulb rises up, they smash that bulb, don't they?
What was that about?
It is a very strained argument to say that the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, had a monopoly on the control of who could and couldn't read the Bible. There's truth to that, but I'm a Protestant. I mean, I have copies of Wycliffe's Bible. The whole reason we know that is because the particular denominational tradition that I am part of has been so open with trying to get the Bible in people's hands. And so are there cases of the church trying to suppress truth? Yeah, unfortunately. And I would recommend my friend John Dixon's book, Bullies and Saints, where he highlights some of those things. But this is irrelevant. To try to tie this into us and saying that we're hiding the truth, it's just it's a web that doesn't, like, the beginnings and the ends and the middles, it's not clear where anything is. So I think he's trying to string things together that he thinks maybe make sense, but they don't actually have a systematized correlation between how point A, B, C, D, how those are flowing. They're kind of jumping all over the place.
They're not going to smash this bulb. That's a new era, baby. I'm a self-made man.
Yeah, I think we can skip this.
The Vatican's handling of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
He's just continuing, and none of this stuff is relevant to anything that actually pertains to what we were talking about, or it's conspiracy, like you said before. It's more conspiracy. It's not based on reality. Look at possible instances where people covered things up.
Right.
Okay, great. That has nothing to do with what happened to you.
Right.
To go. I'm not done. I got a lot more to go. Taking my time tonight. How y'all doing in that live chat? We got a lot of bots, but y'all don't know we got 5 people cleaning the bots out. Every time a bot posts, we got them cleaning them right away. So you don't see most of the bots in that live chat. We got 5 admins in there cleaning. 5 great human beings filled with the light, with the real Christ consciousness, like I have behind me. That's Christ consciousness behind me, the face of God. Not a man in a white robe. Caesar Borgia, a brutal killing murderer, is the image that people are walking around with, this Jesus image all these years.
That's a big conspiracy theory as well, that the image of Jesus was changed by the Roman Catholic Church. Any truth in that?
I don't think so. I mean, the image that I usually put up is like, if you see my thumbnails or whatever, it's Christ Pentecrator, which is an image of Jesus. I usually use the one either from St. Anne's Monastery, the base of Mount Sinai, which is ironically where Codex Sinaiticus was found, or the one from the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. And those are both One is a 3rd century and one is a 4th century image of Jesus. And he's
Hmm.
portrayed there as, you know, a Mediterranean individual. So could it be true that Borgia is this image that was possibly copied and used as kind of like a template? Maybe. But do you know how many images of Jesus we have before that? And nobody thinks that Jesus, any true historian or anybody who's reading the New Testament is going to see who is Jesus? Well, he's a 1st century Jewish,
Yeah.
Middle Eastern itinerant preaching rabbi. Like nobody's claiming, nobody who's honest is claiming anything otherwise. So
The son of a pope that killed his own brother. Craziness. I believe in God. And I've said that 100 billion times. I believe in God. I believe there's a God. I don't doubt that one bit because the quantum physics and the mathematics proves that God actually exists. I'm not an idiot. The evidence is all around us. The evidence is even encased encoded into my own hand. The distance between the digits in my finger, the distance between the last digit of the pinky to the bottom of the top of the wrist. That's all mathematics. It's all encoded. Pi, phi, it's all encoded. It's a fingerprint. The fingerprint of God is everywhere. It's everywhere. And not one time, there's dozens of videos. Not one time you have me hear me saying that I'm an atheist. I tell people I am God and God is me. They were all God. Everyone has the power of Christ inside of them. It's about Christ consciousness. Do you understand the mission that he was on? Do you understand the peace that he wanted to bring to people spiritually, to have them seek the light and become the light and operate within the light? How come I can see that and understand that, but you guys can't? And you're wrapped up in the actual religion itself.
Okay, I want to make a comment here because I would say Billy's not wrong per se with we are supposed to try to embody the love of Christ, you know, but the vehicle Billy is choosing to try to do that through is not a vehicle of repentance. It's not a vehicle of a change of heart. It's a vehicle of putting yourself on the throne of God to try to achieve some type of enlightenment. This is what almost every New Ager believes. Most New Agers believe in this Christ concept conspiracy, if you will. But the true Christ consciousness, theosis, if you will, in the Orthodox kind of perspective, is a unity with God, but through changing your wicked ways and knowing like we as humans are born into sin. You know, I believe in original sin and that we have to turn away from worldly life. And it's not our job to ascend up, you know, to use New Age church, ascend up the chakras to achieve some type of enlightenment. That's a vehicle for spiritual growth for sure. It's not Christ's vehicle though. And there's no mention of that in the New Testament from my studies.
And there is evidence, you know, I'm an advocate for intelligent design. I think there is scientific evidence, mathematical evidence. Everybody should go and listen to the lectures of John Lennox, who's a mathematician. He taught at Oxford, and he still lives in the city of Oxford, but I don't think he teaches at Oxford anymore. I think he's emeritus. He has some great presentations. He actually debated Richard Dawkins on a number of topics, and he is a brilliant mathematician. Stephen Meyer has an excellent book called The Signature in the Cell. He's a biologist and talks about the evidence that we see from creation, the scientific evidence for a creator. But that's not what Billy's talking about here. He's not talking about things like the fine-tuning argument for the existence of God. It's much more vague and esoteric than that. And so I think we just need to be careful, especially people who might not be aware of this kind of stuff. There is actually a level of truth to saying, you know, there's DNA evidence for the existence of God. There are complexities to the universe that exist for the existence of God. My friend Dr. Jonathan McClatchy has some excellent presentations on intelligent design. He's also a biologist. But it's the kind of castigating it in this new age light. It makes it actually strips the actual power and validity of an argument from intelligent design from it.
Mm.
Operating in pure, unadulterated darkness. Extremely evil, conniving, manipulating. You don't believe in your own stuff that you guys teach and preach. Because if you did, you would not need to spend hundreds of thousands of marketing dollars to attack one person and track a person down, making all these contrived phone calls and offering bribes to people. And yes, we have witnesses on that, by the way, all entered into evidence. And you wouldn't have to do that if you really truly believed in your power, in the power of your Christ and your God. It tells me that you don't believe in God and you don't believe in the power of Jesus either. You're just out here floating, fabricating things and doing darkness in the name of God, which is even worse. Even worse. You're pissed off at me because I have a different perspective of God than you do. And it's pissing you off so much to the point where you're willing to jeopardize your own freedom, your actual real freedom, and your bank account to attack in a very dark way. Not even realizing all the energy you're throwing at me, I'm accepting it and alchemically converting it into light. I could have put this video out the next day or the day after. I said to my wife, no, we're going to wait. Let the anticipation continue to build. Let it continue to build. I want more energy. I want all of the energy that they can send me, as much as I can max out. Let them make 50, 60, 70, 100, 1,000 videos. Get all of their hoard together and send them all to me. And that's exactly what you guys did, exactly as I predicted.
So one comment there is that he says that that's what happens with the change of image of Jesus. That whole conspiracy is rooted around esoteric wisdom, that if you change the image of Jesus and there's millions of people praying to that image, you kind of absorb their power. You know, it's a very dark kind of thing, but he literally just said that's exactly what he wants. It's very dark. This is satanic now. I mean, that's what this is starting to go into.
So I just waited patiently. I let the anticipation build. I let the videos go out there and let them get in circulation. I let the hype build up. And then I just absorbing right now at this exact moment in time. I'm actually eating that energy, that dark energy. I'm taking it all in and I'm alchemically converting it into light. You see? That's the difference between me and you. Now, let's get back into talking about some stuff real quick. All right. One of the things I wanted to talk about when he accidentally disconnected his video again was this. I'm talking about Abraham and Isaac. God is supposed to be all knowing and all loving. And all the same, he's all the same all the time. He's the same all the time, right? Well, if that's the case, and you really believe that the God of the Bible is the creator of the universe and has all knowing, all loving, omnipotent, and omniscient, that means he's everywhere at all times and knows everything before it even happens. All powerful. The word all is big here, all loving. Let's take a look at this. Then God said, by the way, God said this according to this text. I don't really believe this is really God, the God of the heavens and created earth and created the universe.
I don't know how much time we'll actually have to dig into this. Yeah, I mean,
he's pretty much ends up saying that if this was to happen in modern times, like, you know, people would be in mental health asylums for wanting to sacrifice their son to God. And again, I think your whole thing, the Bible was written for us, but not to us, is relevant here. But I know it's probably a really long discussion, but do you have any shorthanded comments that can just give people a little bit of peace of mind? Because, you know, this is stuff I've struggled with too. Some of the older Testament stuff is harder to really understand sometimes.
Yeah, I would say, you know, we do need to see some of this stuff as archetypal to what God is foreshadowing for Jesus. I mean, the whole point is that this happened on Mount Moriah, where the temple was eventually built, and that the temple then stood as a place of, you know, where God brought his people to him. And unlike Abraham, where God stayed his hand and said, I do not sacrifice your son, we then see, you know, thousands of years later, that God doesn't stay his hand, and the knife does come down, but on his own son. Ooh. And so this is a foreshadowing, right? God takes on the punishment he deserves, that we deserve rather. So we see this when God makes the covenant with Abraham. the whole point is, and actually we can parallel the covenant that we see within Abraham in the book of Genesis to other ancient Near Eastern covenants. It's actually what would have been expected in the day when you make these type of contracts is you would cut the animal in half, and we read about this in Genesis. You would find an area where there was kind of a rift between two hills, and you would cut animals in half and you would put them on either side, and the blood pools down into the middle. And the two parties involved in the very serious contract walk through the middle of the like the blood kind of creek. And the idea is that if either one of us breaks this contract, this is what we are saying is owed to us. And you see in the text of Genesis where Abraham falls into a deep sleep and is very troubled. In fact, the language is basically communicating depression in Hebrew. And the reason for that is because Abraham knows he cannot fulfill that agreement. He knows he's going to mess up because he knows he's a sinful individual. And Genesis says that while Abraham sleeps, a vessel with floating with fire appears in the middle of the crevice, and it goes through. In other words, God says, if you break the covenant, I take on the penalty. And if I break the covenant, I take on the penalty. So we see these foreshadowings because what then happens is that God himself in the second person of the Trinity comes and he takes that punishment on himself. We also need to keep in mind that although the term boy is used in the translation here in Genesis, it is very possible that Isaac was a man. It is very possible, given the timeline, that Isaac was a teenager and that Abraham was an elderly individual. And that if it happened, Isaac could and would have fought off his father and could have easily overpowered him. So there is a lot going on in the text that we at sort of first glance might not realize. And yes, this was a test of faith to Abraham. And you know what? The text actually indicates, and we see this in later Jewish midrash, in like the rabbinical traditions, that it says that Abraham's faith was so devoted to God that he believed that even if he killed his son, God would have resurrected him.
Wow.
That God would have done that. And that is why he was willing to do it. Because he knew the character of God, that God is merciful and loving and abounding in steadfast kindness, and that his trust was going to be faithful up until the point of sacrificing his one and only son, and that he trusted that God, given that he knew who God was, because of the character and faithfulness of God up until that point, of providing a son, even when Abraham at this point, remember, when Abraham is told he's going to have a son, he's 100 years old. This is an elderly guy, right? That's why Sarah laughs, because she's like, listen, I'm 99 and my husband is 100. You think we're going to have a kid? But they'd seen the faithfulness of God already. So I think what Billy is missing the whole context of the narrative, of the overarching kind of meta narrative of Scripture, like isolating these passages that Billy goes through. I mean, he clearly has not read a commentary on Genesis, because I mean, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 commentaries on the book of Genesis on my shelf. There are so many people who have written about this stuff. To just assume that you are the ultimate authority on this, it's not true. And we let Scripture interpret Scripture. And even when we put it in isolation in terms of something like just looking at the historical and grammatical and syntactical context of what's going on in the particular passage, it's just so narrow and isolationist to read the text like Billy's reading it right now. And it's an emotional argument. It's not an exegetical argument. He's not walking through the text and providing a contextual understanding of what was going on, what happened up until this point with Isaac, with the promises that God made to him, what then happens in terms of what God says. Because what was God's promise to Abraham? I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the beach. That was his promise. And God had shown his faithfulness to Abraham up until that point, and Abraham had every reason to trust in that. And so he knew that if he did this, what God was asking him to do, God would be faithful no matter what. And that's why the Jewish rabbis say that Abraham believed that Jesus would, or not Jesus, well, yeah, arguably, I mean, same difference, that
Right.
God would resurrect Isaac. Now, can we say that that's what was going through Abraham's head? No, because the text doesn't say that. But is it reasonable to assume that based on what we do see happening? I I think it could very well be.
Beautiful.
What happens and all that good stuff, all powerful, but he just couldn't predict that Abraham was actually going to follow his orders. Are you kidding me? I mean, is this a comedy that I'm reading? A dark comedy? Is this a dramedy that I'm reading? You mean to tell me this God didn't know that this guy was going to follow his orders, so why even put him through the motions? Is that what you guys are telling me right now? Never got to ask that question. I mean, I can go on and on and on. You would think that Jesus in the New Testament would have a different view of slavery, but slavery is still approved in the New Testament.
Okay, this one's important. James, you can keep it up on the screen. You don't have to go super deep, Wesley, but I know when you and Mark were debating this with Billy, you weren't hearing this part. I remember that vividly, and they were talking about slavery, and then I heard, watching it back, like you can hear you, but I don't think they heard you, and I don't think you heard them. So do you want to just briefly talk about historical Christianity, and how it actually liberates women and slaves, and Paul's letters and how they're out of context from Billy's point of view, and again how the Bible's written for us, not to us?
Yeah, so I'll say a number of things. Like you said, I would articulate the Bible is written for us, but not to us. And what I mean by that is that this is a collection of books that span a long period of time, right? The Bible is 66 books written over a period of 1,600 years on 3 different continents by close to 40 different authors in 3 different languages. And we see multiple genres included. We see biography and history and poetry. We see genealogy. We see wisdom literature and philosophy. And sometimes those even overlap, where you have historical narrative and then there's poetry involved within that. And so I think we're seeing lots of things that are taking place. And a primary to the biblical text is that all humanity is created in the image of God and has intrinsic worth by bearing that image of God. And so by that, we see, and I would once again point to the works done by individuals like Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man actor, the historian, in his work Dominion, where he goes through talking about the abolition movements throughout history and says they are either directly Judeo-Christian movements or they are directly informed by Judeo-Christian movements because of this idea. And that the earliest abolition movements throughout history were, and I think I mentioned this in my interaction with Billy, were by individuals like the Cappadocian Fathers, who preached some of the first sermons directly saying that slavery is wrong and it's sinful. Now, let me just read to you. I have, so this is D.J.A. Klein's. He's an ancient Near Eastern ethicist. And so he has this article called Social Responsibility in the Old Testament. He says, it is not extraordinary, not to say amusing, that the one society in the ancient Near East that had a law protecting runaway slaves was the society that traced its origin to a group of runaway slaves from Egypt. The point is that Israel had experienced God as the one who is sympathetic to a runaway slave. So, this law is not just an ethical or legal principle in defense of human rights, but a reflex of Israel's own religious experience, a fundamental characteristic of biblical ethics. And that's what we see throughout the biblical text, right? The final, part of well, let me rephrase that. So it was never natural to understand slavery as something that God wanted in the Old Testament. In other words, it was not regarded as divinely ordered and a part of creation itself, as though slaves and free were different degrees of humanity. And the very first mention of a slave and a slaver is in context to a curse in Genesis 9. In Genesis 9, the future slave status of Canaan is attributed to the curse of Noah. And slavery is seen throughout Scripture as unnatural, fallen, and even cursed, and in no way, in a sense, an essential part of the unchangeable nature of creation. But the highest point of the Old Testament ethical critique of slavery is actually found on the lips of Job. Job, when speaking of his own slaves, he says, "Did not he who made me in the womb also make them? Did not the same one form us both within our mothers?" I believe that's Job 31:15, if I'm remembering correctly. And I think, I could go on, but you see, Paul's discourse in places like Colossians 3:28 or Colossians 1:4 that talks about how in Christ there is no slave nor free, that fundamentally overturns slavery in that kind of moment. And then you have individuals like Basil of Caesarea, the Cappadocian father, or the 4th century, or sorry, that was in the 4th century, or William Wilberforce in the 18th century. And every example we can point to of these type of movements by individuals consistently looking at, people looking consistently at Scripture within its context and coming to the conclusion that slavery is neither natural nor moral in any way. And that we see these kind of texts in regards to slavery in the Old Testament, not because God condones it, but because God is operating in a particular time and place. And Jesus even says this when people bring up divorce to him. And he says, the reason why Moses, by God, was given laws about divorce was not because God wanted divorce to be a thing. It was because of the hardness of the people's hearts. He knew that sinful people were not going to adhere by the laws that he was giving. And so he needed to make sure that when they tried to find loopholes, he would make it at least protecting the women who had to go through these things. So, some things in the Old Testament are, and Billy gets into this, he references a number of passages later on where he's confusing what's often described as descriptive passages and prescriptive passages. A descriptive passage is describing something that happened, right? Lot sleeps with his daughters. Okay, that's describing something that happened. It's not then saying, okay, now go and do likewise. That would be prescriptive. That would be telling you to do something. But it's not doing that. It's telling you something that did happen. And it's telling you as an example that you should be disgusted by. You should have a revulsion towards that because Scripture is being very honest about the human condition. But when we confuse and conflate a passage that's describing something and a passage that's telling you to do something, it does violence to the text and puts the text in a place that the author would have never understood in its communication of its intent. So Billy does this in a number of passages. We have a letter in the New Testament, and let me finish with this, called Philemon. Okay? The letter of Philemon is a letter that Paul sends to the master of a runaway slave, a guy named Onesimus. And the whole point of the letter is saying, you, Philemon, believe that this individual, this runaway slave, Onesimus, is your lesser. And Paul is saying, he's your brother. He's your brother in Christ, and treat him as if he was my own son. We have that. We have a letter that Paul writes to a slave master about a slave that has run away. And Paul actually says, you need to go back and you need to make amends. But your master is claiming to be a Christian. And so you are going to grab him by his baptism and you're going to hold him account to that because he does not have the right to treat you wrongly, because in Christ there is no differences. All of these divisions that we make between each other are nothing. We are brothers in Christ. So, this is the kind of stuff that the abolitionists looked at and they said, man, we have no ground to stand on if we're trying to sell other people. And that's why the things like human rights that we assume today, we assume them, but they find that they're the fruit that grows from the root of biblical Christianity.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think I know you got to run. So would you be able to this is one last thing, and I don't think Billy brought this up in the stream, but can you just for the record like debunk the thing about Jesus's name? Because Billy alludes to that a lot, and I know it was something you wanted to get to in the debate, but a lot of New Agers and Gnostics, they get caught up on the Yeshua, the J wasn't created, that's not his real name. When you're calling on Jesus, you're calling on Zeus, like just a bunch of nonsense for people who don't understand basic things. But what do you speak Hebrew?
Sorry, I was muted there. I read Hebrew, so I
Okay,
can't
so
speak modern Hebrew, but I can read
it.
ancient Hebrew.
Okay,
Yeah.
So you'll understand this. I'd love just for people to hear it. We don't gotta. I know you gotta run, so the rest is pretty much about me. This after he gets done with this Bible stuff.
Yeah. Let me just say, okay, so Jesus is the anglicized version of the Greek word Jesus. So the New Testament authors transliterate and translate the name Jesus, which is the Greek version it's the Hellenized version of the Hebrew Yeshua. And Yeshua itself is a compound of two Hebrew words that means Yahweh saves. So the thing is, in first century Roman occupied Judea, we know for a fact that Jews would have gone by a number of names, right? We have this in the sense that you could have been called Yehob, which would have been Jacob. In Greek, you would have gone by Jakobos. And so you would have had like an Aramaic, a Hebrew, and a Greek version of your name that you probably would have answered to, because this is a multilingual society. And the Jews in Jesus's day, they would have been speaking Aramaic as their primary language. They would have been speaking a little bit of Hebrew, although that would have largely been relegated to religious context. And they almost certainly would have known some Greek, because at this time, the Roman soldiers that are running around are still speaking Greek. So you need to know what they're saying, right? So otherwise you're in trouble. So the modern English simply adopts the J for the Latin I in the 16th and 17th century. So by the time we get to, say, the early modern English Bibles like the King James that Billy likes to talk about a lot, the Latin Iesu in its nominative and vocative forms grammatically from the Greek Iesus just incorporates the J, and Jesus turns into Jesus. But that's all it is. It's just an anglicized Germanic, because English is a Germanic language, version of the Latin, which is in itself a translation of the Greek. Now, the New Testament authors had no problem translating Jesus' name into Greek. And so if there's something magical, something special, something we're missing, if we're not calling Jesus, so in Hebrew, it would have been Yehoshua. In Aramaic, it would have been Yeshua, or even Yeshu as a short form. The New Testament authors don't seem to think preserving that specialness of that name is fundamentally essential, because Jesus knows who you're talking about when you call on his name, right? And so, so it's just, I think it's making too much of too little to start harping on, they changed the name of Jesus. I mean, you go all around the world and there's going to be translations of Jesus's name. I mean, even Peter's name, right? Pedro, Petros, Pablo, like these are all versions of Peter. And so it just makes sense. I mean, let me also say when Billy says in some of his videos that Jesus means Hail Zeus, It doesn't. Zeus in Greek has an unnatural declension, but in its genitive and dative and accusative forms, which are the natural ones that you would read, it's dios. So, and hail in Greek is hyro. So it would have been hyro deos. Does that sound like Jesus? Jesus? No, it doesn't. But once again, and in Latin, it's Jupiter, right? Jupiter. So it just, it's more examples of Billy, unfortunately, just either not doing his homework, fabricating things wholesale, but at the end of the day, communicating falsehoods about who Jesus is and what that means for people who follow Jesus.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So everybody listening, you can have peace. Like, man, Wesley, like for real, people are actually scared to say Jesus's name because of things like this. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
very real popular topic amongst New Agers.
Yeah. It's very
So you
unfortunate.
can have peace knowing that when you pray to Jesus, you're not praying to Zeus. You're not
Yeah.
doing any of that. So I know you got to run, man. I really appreciate you doing this and your time. Everybody make sure you give Wesley a follow. And like I said, if it's in your heart to donate, that would be awesome. But
Yeah.
any
I
last
really,
words?
I really hope people see this as, we're just trying to clarify the confusion of these details.
Yes.
What Billy has put out is just not accurate to the situation at hand. It would have been one thing if you just came out and said, like, hey, I made some mistakes. We're just going to move on from here. But to accuse us of criminal activity, to just make wholesale facts up about who I am and who Anton is and our lives and it's just it's too bad. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
But I think people need to realize what actually is true. And at the end of the day, what Billy is putting out there is not true. So, I mean, he had a beef with me harping on the things that we talk about and saying, oh, that's just, we've just talked about, 1% of all the things that I talk about. And my point in capitalizing on that was like, hey, Billy, if you're getting all these things so badly wrong, it actually brings into question everything else you say. It
Exactly.
does. It
Exactly.
brings into question if
The
you have
alien
shown,
stuff, it's just so
if you
weird.
have shown that you cannot do accurate research, if the evidence on the table is that you don't know how to do that, then I have more than enough evidence and reason to then say, I'm pretty sure you haven't done a very good job on this other stuff either. That I can't trust that
Mm,
because you have no methodology that actually communicates that you know how to research and critically look at evidence and look at facts and then conclude based on that inference of what actually did happen in the past. Yeah.
mm.
But yeah, thanks, Anton. I really appreciate you having me
Yeah.
on and clearing this up. This whole fiasco, I think, is interesting to say the least. But if nothing else, it's brought us together,
Yeah.
and
Heck
I've
yeah.
really appreciated that, and that's been good.
Same.
And God is doing amazing things. So God can draw a straight line with a crooked stick, and He's doing that.
Amen. Mm. Yeah, thank you so much, Wesley. I just appreciate who you are and online, offline, having the same person is so refreshing to me, man. It's healing. It's actually healing for me because I've spent my whole life like seeing people behave like Billy's behaving now publicly, but then get on
Mm,
a stage and get revered by the world because it's a different character. So
mm,
just like having healthy like friendships and relationships uh, has just been life altering for me. So I can't thank you enough in your work as well. It's beautiful and it's saving souls. So yeah, thank you, brother.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, appreciate
All right.
you.
All right,
We'll talk
man. Good
soon.
seeing you. Talk soon.
Cheers.
Bye. All right. So I'm gonna just there's a lot here, but I'm not gonna react to it all. There's just a couple public things Billy said about me and my ex, and I just want to clear the air. I don't speak with her. And if she's listening, I'm sorry he brought you into this. Um, yeah, I'm gonna mute her name, but I just want to like clear the record around some stuff.
All right. Defendant number 3, the easiest case of them all. This is the linchpin that took the illegal content and distributed it online. The content that I didn't want distributed because I knew that it was contrived. It was heavily edited. Some of it was dubbed. It was also a setup. It was one-sided, and it made us look like complete amateurs. Even if it didn't have any of the other attributes to it, just the way that it looked, period, point blank, it looked like an absolute clown show, and I didn't want to be involved in a clown show. Now, what are these photos up here? You can see the bar over the face, the black mark over the face. It's showing in a couple of photos. This gentleman has been to my house, as he stated in his hate video, another dark entity. We invited him to my wife's birthday party, to a New Year's Eve party. We've done work with this man for over the years. We've done workshops and classes and training sessions over many years. My wife actually knew him for 20 years, and I've known him since probably, 2019, something like that, when I started helping him promote Dr. Joe Dispenza, who he actually worked for, Dr. Joe. It was 2018, 2019. I started doing promotions for him on my social media accounts when I used to take paid promotions. Now I don't do that anymore. I only promote my own stuff. But back then, just trying to monetize, I promoted other people's content, other people's conferences and so forth. And Dr. Joe was one of the larger, accounts, marketing accounts. So that's how I met him. I did. My wife knew him long before I even met her. It was just a coincidence that we actually ended up knowing the same person. I thought he was a cool guy. I really did. I spoke so highly of this man. Again, another person I let in my inner circle. I really thought he was a cool person. I thought he was on the same frequency. I had done several things with him over the years, breathwork meditations and workshops and classes. Paid him money. He paid me money. Matter of fact, here's the last check he gave me right here. This is paid from his company, $11,000 he paid me. I was in a live workshop with him, Reverend Michael Beckwith, and a couple of other top-notch speakers. They were all good guys with a lot of real good knowledge. And my payment was $11,000. He paid me by PayPal, as you see witnessed there in my receipts. This gentleman gets on a video and says the other day, now let me go back. I digress. Let me go back. Let me paint a better picture of defendant number 3. He was on the frequency of the Christ consciousness and loving and helpful and cheerful and happy when he was married to his beautiful wife.
Yeah, buddy.
And something happened and he turned dark. He started gradually turning dark. I'm not sure what happened within their relationship, but it ended. I was kind of shocked. I hadn't seen her and him together in a while. And when I found out that it had ended and he had actually moved from Michigan to Florida, I said, okay, well, we'll do some things together. He claims in this video that at that time, which would have been either, 2019 or 2018, that I told him I was 70 years old. At that time, it would have been probably 48. He claims, this is one of the most asinine things I've ever heard in my life, and I'm going to tell you the stem and the root of it goes into defendant number 4. He claims that I told him that I was 70 years old, and I did that so I could sell colloidal silver. How in the world am I going to sell colloidal silver by telling people I'm 70 when I'm clearly in my 40s? And as some would have thought, I was in my 30s at the time. I would have sounded like a complete bumbling idiot. Now, if that was true, and everything else he said in this hate video, he's a cocaine dealer and all this, he's laundering money and all this. If he felt I was doing all this stuff, why did he do business with me for 5 years? Just as recently as that last invoice was paid, just in last year. Why do business with me if you know that I'm just lie? If somebody came to me his age and told me they were 70, I would say, oh, I can't do business. This guy's a psychopath. I got to walk away from this guy. But yet and still, he did business with me for years.
Whew. Okay, lots to say there. Short. I'm just going to be short with it. My ex-wife does not exist. He's alluding to an ex-girlfriend. We were never married. So that kind of shows you the lack of intimacy of our supposed friendship. I was not in Billy's inner circle. And if I was, his inner circle is strange because it's not like my inner circle. Like I've been to the guy's house, I think 3 or 4 times. We've done less than 10 workshops since 2017. So I haven't been overly close with him, if you will. I didn't know about his fraud when I first met him. He did lie to me about his age, and that made me question, but I was a dumb, naive kid. I mean, I was young. I'm 29 now. I was a young guy. I have a lot of issues. I've had a lot of issues about, I have a father wound, right? So typically with people with father wounds, they look for a father. So I clinged to people like Billy, and Billy was not the first one I've clinged to. I've clinged to many. And then ultimately I cling to Christ because he is the spiritual father, if you will, the true father. But, yeah, everything pretty much for the most part, what he's saying here is true. He did tell me he was an older age than he actually is or was. And there's evidence of that. You could see that in my video. There's probably at least 20, 30 comments of people confirming they saw that as well, his own followers. So all that stuff is what he's saying right now is a lie. Yes, I did a workshop with him and other spiritual leaders last year. And it wasn't about God, like it was about law of attraction, which was something I used to teach about. Again, I don't believe in that stuff. I don't teach that stuff anymore. He also alluded to me. Yeah, I think that's really all I want to say there. Just kind of clear the air. Yes, I did pay him $11,000. All that's legit. Those were for the ticket sales of the event, and we gave him a code for his followers to get more people in, and that's really why I stayed around Billy, was because I really knew he wasn't doing good work, and I believed what I had was good. So I was like, well, at least I can help people, funnel them to my thing, and let me help them. And I never talked about what he talks about. I mean, I'm keeping my old content up for a reason. Like, I didn't delete it. I deleted some videos. It's just like super cringe lifestyle stuff that is just like, ugh, I can't even watch it these days. But in terms of my teachings, my old teachings, I kept everything up. Like, he's talking about me stepping on the neck of women and things like that. Actually, if you listen to the words I say, I pretty much talk about how feminine empowerment in today's world has become masculine. Women are not being liberated in their femininity, they're being liberated in their masculinity. They're saying they're queens, but they're really behaving like kings, and it's all disguised. And I still believe that. So the roots of feminism is actually rooted to Satanism, because they believe the snake in the garden was what you should be worshiping, because it freed Eve and Adam into deeper wealths of knowledge. So that's where all that comes from. Yeah, it's just not, it's not what I stood for at all. And I used to be a very liberal man. I'd call it a boy, where I was like splitting rent with my ex, who Billy alluded to, and these things. And that breakup did hurt, and it still does hurt. But it made me a man, because I that relationship ended ultimately because I was a boy, and I didn't know how to really be the man. Like, I just didn't know how to be the man. I wanted to split everything. It was just, I was a coward. I was just pure coward. I mean, I was young too, still learning. But yeah, so I just want to clear the air there. And let's see what else he has to say, and this will be wrapped up in a few minutes.
Where does this 70 come from? Let's talk about that for a minute. Let's clarify what happened with that. Defendant number 4 saw an article about me online, not written by me, not hired to be written by me. Someone wrote an article about me. Some random site saw me as an up-and-coming producer and said, hey, I want to write an article about this guy. And they did. In that article, they went to my IMDb, Internet Movie Database. That's where all the movies and TV series are stored, and people can get their credits for whatever work they've done in film. On my IMDb, it has a bio of me. And in my bio, it has my name and information about me. It has my height, my skin tone, my eye color, my hair color, my weight, and all that information. Because if somebody's looking to book you, they need to know that information so they can see if you're the person that's the right fit for what they're looking for a TV show or series. Inside my bio, my height was in there at 6'4", 6'4", 6, quote, 4, double quote, 6'4". The person that wrote that article, they must have cut and pasted some of my bio, because it was in there word for word. When they cut and pasted it into their blogging software or whatever that was, the 6'4" was in there, but it became 64. So I guess in some way, or the sloppiness of how they were reading it or understanding or comprehending, whatever it was, it just said 64. It said Billy Carson, 64. But on my IMDb, it says Billy Carson, 6'4", with the quotes, the quotations, designating my height, showing that I'm a tall individual. So it became Billy Carson, 64, instead of 6'4". That got carried on and got indexed into Google. Other people were then writing articles about me, but copying. What happens when somebody writes an article from these like B and C level article companies online, they all kind of grab from the same information and they kind of modify just a little bit, and then they put it out, because they're just trying to get traffic to their site so they can get their Google ad revenue. So it kind of became 50, 60, 70, 80 people with almost the same exact content, but still always saying Billy Carson 64. So I started going live and doing videos and things like that. At some point, people started asking me, hey man, this guy's 64 years old. Not 70, 64 at the time. And I would comment back, no, I'm not 64 years old. That's a mistyping article. I've gone live and I've got clips on Forbidden Knowledge on my Facebook and Instagram account of me explaining this exact thing.
And he's right. He does have clips now, because people caught on that it wasn't true. But he rode this lie for a very, very, very long time. Allegedly, of course.
I've talked about this, I don't know, 5 or 6 times over all this decade or whatever, explaining this over the last 5 years, explaining this crazy coincidence thing that happened. I got a Wikipedia page put up, not Wikipedia, but Wikidia, with the sister company to Wikipedia. And I put that in my my bio on X, which used to be Twitter, and a few other places, because it shows my date of birth and my age. It says right there, 9/4/1971, and my age. At this time, I'm 53 years old. Defendant number 4 had taken or looked and saw one of those articles and taken that and contrived his own story and told it to this guy. This guy ran with it. Well, either he saw the article and then told it to defendant number 4. I'm not sure which way it went. Either way, the two of them were communicating and having a conversation about that, because I have a copy of some of those conversations. He took some information that had been spread online in the past from another defendant, which I'm going to.
Okay, so I'm just going to end it here. Honestly, I don't even want to talk about this stuff anymore. You can look up the Broward County websites of Billy's legal history. I did a whole video on it. JT Pocket Watcher did a whole video on it, and many others are doing videos on it, because, again, he does have a criminal past. No big deal. We all have one, right? Well, not all have criminal past, but we all have a past, right? It's one thing to have a past. It's a whole other thing to lie and cover it up. And being in an authoritative position like Billy's in, there's a responsibility that's even deeper. So people know, like, hey, can I really trust this guy? And if you have a past and you're trying to cover it up, why can't you just come clean about it? Like, why is it so hard to just come clean about it? And that's all we've wanted Billy to do through this whole thing. We never even said, we are not saying, Billy, you have to claim Jesus's resurrection to be true and real and verifiable. We're just saying, hey, please detract your statements about Christianity. That's all we've said, or at least apologize for them, saying, hey, I now not have new information that these are fraudulent documents. I'm sorry, I messed up. I'm still growing. My research wasn't as good as I thought it was. I said that at the end of my video. I said, hey, if you say that, I'll delete this entire video. We're looking for accountability. He says he's one of the top researchers in the world. So it's like this, like, millions of people believe him, but there's no validity to a lot of his claims. So it's just not right. If you're going to talk about our religion, you have to at least get it right. Again, you don't have to believe in it, but if you're going to state things, don't twist it. It's just not right. So yeah, I'm just about over this myself. This is probably the last video I'm going to do talking about this stuff. Ultimately, I hope this is leading more people to Christ. That's the goal here. I want people to know God. I want people to not have to question the authority of the Bible, and know that there's a loving, benevolent God that just wants a relationship with you, and he died for your sins. And if you put your faith in him and repent from your old life, you will be saved. And the fruits of your life will show that. I'd encourage you to watch my testimonial. I can't even talk about this without crying, not because I'm sad, because I'm still in so much awe. This is also new for me and fresh for me, and I'm also doing it publicly now, and it's overwhelming. I didn't necessarily think this was gonna happen, not like this. So, pray for Billy. Pray for Billy. Pray for Billy's wife. I know Elizabeth way better than I know Billy. There's a good woman in there. I've seen it many times. So please pray for these people. I believe in the power of prayer. When I was not saved, some of my old clients who went to my New Age seminars, like 3 or 4 of them, were praying for me for years before I came to Christ. So I know, and so was my grandma, and so were other people. I know the power of prayer is very real. Intercession is very real. So pray for Billy. Pray for Billy. And thank you all for listening. Make sure you subscribe. I'm going to be making more videos on a lot of topics, and I have a lot of critiques of Christians as well. And I think, as somebody who has a deep understanding of the other side of Christianity, because I want to let everybody know, for the record, my page is not here to talk to Christians. I can help some Christians discern some New Age and occult and other doctrines, if you will, that are entering into the church and they have no idea what's happening. But really, I'm here more so to build a bridge from those people in those communities to Christ through different lenses, because there's a lot of ways you can ultimately land at Jesus being God, who he says he is. So I'm learning in real time. Please go gentle. I know a lot of you guys are critiquing me, critiquing Mark. I've only been a Christian for almost exactly a year now. So there's a lot to all of this, but I appreciate everybody nonetheless. This has been eye-opening in so many ways. And yeah, subscribe, like, make sure you give Mark and Wesley a follow if you feel in your heart to donate to Mark's company. It's Dream Shine. It's located in Ohio. If you feel in your heart to donate to Wesley and Canadian Apologetics, and that's in your heart, feel free to do those things. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you for listening.